It's raining, it's already late autumn. The wind wrapped around the few leaves on the dry sweet-scented osmanthus tree in front of the courtyard, and the patter of rain wet the soil and fell into the dilapidated house. I heard people say, if someone is going, a tree will die before the court. Zhang Fengyuan didn't believe in these evils at first, until he saw with his own eyes the green and tall sweet-scented osmanthus tree outside the window. The leaves withered and yellowed in the autumn wind overnight, and the trunk became light and unstable. The sweet-scented osmanthus tree was planted when he was 20 years old, and it has been more than 50 years old now. Over the years, no matter how dry it is in summer and how thick the snow is in winter, the yard is still full of sweet-scented osmanthus fragrance in autumn. Such a tenacious sweet-scented osmanthus tree died without warning. Over the years, there was only one old bachelor in Zhang's courtyard, who lived alone for decades, and now that the tree in front of the court was dead, the only person who was going to die was Zhang Fengyuan himself. He was lying in the cold room under the rain in the late autumn night. His body was as limp as a puddle of soft mud, hunched in the black and iron-like bedding, and even taking a breath could take half of his strength. There was no light in the room, and the only thing guarded by the bed was the cold wind blowing in before the window paper was pasted. The rain fell and the sky darkened, making the room more and more lonely. Ever since he was bedridden, his life has been muddled. When he is more energetic, he touches the wall to get up and cook a few bites of food. No one will come for 10 days and a half months. The consciousness has been blurred for so many days, but today is very strange. After nightfall, he felt cold, and when he heard it was raining outside, his consciousness suddenly became clear, and he was able to distinguish between cold and heat. His heart was wide open, knowing that tonight was the last hour. After waking up, he quietly listened to the sound of rain that filled the house. The dilapidated roof could not cover the rain, and it leaked straight into the house, and the nearest ones dripped on the side of his bed. Insufficient strength, he can only lie on the bed like a hay and think about his muddled life. The Zhang family was not deserted, and it was lively in the past. He, Zhang Fengyuan, was not an orphan. Before the age of 12, he was always a child with a father and a mother, as well as uncles and cousins. At that time, he lived a chic life. Today he went to the fields to catch fish, and tomorrow he went to the mountains to hunt birds. He also learned the butcher's craft from the old widower in the village. He was a good hand at everything. Because he is the fastest jumper and has a muscular body, the children in the village embrace him as the king of children, calling the wind and the rain, and he said that no one in the village dares to say anything. How proud he was at that time! He patted his chest and told his old lady that he would become a landlord in the village, earn thousands of dollars, build a house, marry 3 or 5 wives and have a bunch of children, so that the Zhang family would continue to prosper. His mother always laughed at him for not knowing the heights of the sky and the depths of the earth. He was not practical and prudent at all, and he just talked empty words every day. Zhang Fengyuan made a wish and wanted to prove it to his mother. How could he think that day has not yet come, when his father came back drunk and had a big fight with his mother? His mother couldn't help but jump into the river. He wanted to bite his father to death with hatred, but before he could bite on it, his father swallowed it the next day. Only then did he realize that his mother stole the man, and I couldn't be more angry. Zhang Fengyuan took care of the funeral of Lao Tzu and his mother, and his life was upside down. Taking the money the family had saved for him to marry a wife, eating, drinking, and having fun, and befriending some worthless rich young masters in the city, being used as swordsmen, he still happily thought that he was so capable, but in the end he gave to his most trusted master and young master. He took the blame and went to prison, and came out sick and disabled and couldn't find a job. He thought he had spent his whole life recklessly and freely, but in the end he didn't even have a person to retire to the end of his life. Uncles, cousins didn't want to see him, so he was left out of the clan long ago. The reputation in the village is also muddy, and he has always been a useless old bachelor and with no business. After being ill for a long time, the enthusiastic villagers did not come to pay attention to major matters, and finally ended up alone and died in bed. It was only at the end that he realized that this was an absurd waste of his life. His eyes were straight open, with remorse in his heart, staring at the dead osmanthus tree outside the house. Maybe he didn't know when he lost his breath. Zhang Fengyuan, Zhang Fengyuan. Are you at the head of the house? Zhang Fengyuan. In a daze, Zhang Fengyuan seemed to hear someone calling his name, followed by a violent knock on the door. He was a little annoyed that any junior in the village could still call him by his name, no matter what, he was of the grandpa's generation. But the sound of knocking on the door and shouting was really loud, and he jumped up from the bed. Only at this time did he realize that something was wrong. When did his body become so strong and light? He walked out of the house in disbelief. The cold wind was blowing outside, the grass withered, the yard was empty, and the sweet-scented osmanthus tree that had been with him for decades was gone. You're in the house, the water in Sue's house is boiling and you can't come over, people are so anxious. Hurry up, take your things and go, the meat buyers are here, so it's useless to ask people to wait. Zhang Fengyuan looked at the familiar yet somewhat unfamiliar young face in front of him. He remembered that this kid was the fourth child of the Chen family, a neighbor of their family. When he was young, he often followed his buttocks, but this kid fell to the bottom of the cliff when he was weak. He fell to his death. It was already decades ago, how can he still stand here now? Why are you so dumbfounded? Zhang Fengyuan said, what are you calling me for? I see that you drank too much wine in the city yesterday and you are still not sober. Today Sue's family slaughtered pigs, and you promised them to slaughter pigs early in the morning. Now you are still dawdling in the house. What do you think I called you for? Chen Si saw that the person in front of him was still wandering, but he went into the house and cleaned up all the pig butchers for him. Zhang Fengyuan stared blankly at the familiar and unfamiliar environment around him, as if he had returned to more than 30 years ago, when he was 19 years old. Even the yard was still empty, and the sweet-scented osmanthus tree had not been planted yet. He ran around the house, and finally stopped by the well to look at his young face and his bulging chest muscles that were stretched by his clothes. He rubbed his face, and later even pulled his face until he gasped in pain. A surge of joy slowly rose from the soles of his feet, so rushing that he almost lost his footing. What are you doing there? You must be bewitched. Zhang Fengyuan ignored Chen Si's question, happily snatched the thing in his hand, and touched this set of old buddies he had spent a lot of money on. The handle was still clear in wood color, and the knife it was never blunt, everything was still brand new. Chen Si was thinking about why this person looked weird today, when he was suddenly pulled up. You are the one who has returned to your soul, hurry up, don't make everyone wait. Chen Si was being carried by Zhang Fengyuan, and seeing the person who was striding forward with his mouth almost splitting to the ear, he felt weird and creepy. He couldn't get up and down in his heart, and softened his tone, Fengyuan, you should go to the city to eat less bars in the future. I know you are not short of the money, but you go every day, the village where you come and go, it's time to talk nonsense again. I think you are acting weird today, and besides, at our age, it's time to talk about marriage. Who would dare to come to the door if the reputation outside is bad? Zhang Fengyuan really didn't remember anyone saying such pertinent words to him before. Su Shi never listened to him in the past, but after all his life, hearing such admonition now and now, he couldn't help being moved. He hooked passing Chen Si's neck. He agreed, okay. I won't go to the city to eat and drink. Chen Si knows that human nature is not so easy to change, and Zhang Fengyuan is also pitiful. He used to be a good young man, but his temper has deteriorated due to a great change in his family. Now he has the virtue of drinking and playing, and he can be persuaded to come back without a few words. If he could really listen to the words, the uncle of the Zhang family would not close the door and be cold-faced when he met Zhang Fengyuan, and the aunt on the other side of Zhang's mother's natal house would not sigh and avoid it. But when Chen Si saw Zhang Fengyuan's sincere attitude, even knowing that he didn't take his words into his heart, he still had a smile on his infected face. That's right, half of the pigs killed by Sue's family today are sold and half are sold. There are a lot of people who buy meat. The winter solstice is coming soon, and my mother also asked me to mortgage pigs for Sue's family. Then I can bargain for a price and buy 2 caddies of meat to go back to the tooth-making festival. Zhang Fengyuan said cheerfully, we have to eat mutton during the winter solstice, it's warm. Chen Si sighed, that stuff is so expensive, nearly half the price of pork, how can I afford it? Zhang Fengyuan's eyes were full of smiles, I'll get some back tomorrow, and you can come to my house to eat. Chen Si's eyes lit up, really? Are you really calling me? What are you doing? Food tastes bad when eaten alone, but it tastes better when eaten by many people. I'm afraid you are the only one in our village who can say this. Zhang Fengyuan laughed, he was indeed the only one in the village whose parents passed away and left some money. He fed the whole family by himself, and in this respect he was naturally more free and easy than ordinary people. Chen Si was very excited, and he talked more and more, mysteriously said, I heard that the Su family has killed a lot of people this time, not only to buy meat, but also matchmakers. I heard that they want to find Mrs. Su looked at the girl and said kiss. Zhang Fengyuan raised his eyebrows. He used to focus on the city and didn't know much about the gossip in the village, about marriage. Are you confused? The second daughter of the Su family, Su Xiaochun, passed the exam last year, but she hasn't been selected yet. I'm going to join in the fun. Chen Si showed a man's usual flirtatious smile, what if I'm lucky? It was spotted by the second girl. Zhang Fengyuan raised his eyebrows. This Su Xiaochun is recognized as the village flower in their Jishu village. The girl was born with a juicy look, even the daughters raised by some wealthy families in the city can be compared. The matchmaker said that she is easy to give birth to. Master, the men in the lost village can't find the north. Now that the little girl has reached the age where she can marry, she will naturally become a favorite. When it comes to this matter, Zhang Fengyuan's heart is also hot. Why hasn't the Zhang family come here? Didn't the fourth child of the Chen family go to Yale? I guess he overslept. What time is it? No matter how much you oversleep, you can't sleep until this hour. It's okay if you oversleep, but don't get drunk and fall into the river. I heard that there was an alcoholic in the neighboring village who got drunk and left the city. Fortunately, he was picked up by a passerby, otherwise he would have died. It is freezing cold, and the drunkard is still lying at home. The Zhang family boy is also a prodigal. I think his father was also capable back then. He must have left him a lot of money for him to spend his days in the city eating, drinking and having fun. There were 2 tables set up in the courtyard of the Su family, surrounded by a few women and brothers who were picking vegetables and peeling garlic, and men were sitting or standing beside them, kneading dried pumpkin seeds, and everyone was waiting for the butcher to come. By the way, I talked about the influential figures in the village. Eating and drinking is nothing, he still went to the flower house, and went to the casino with the young master in the city. He got mixed up with what he should do and what he shouldn't do. It's a crime, but tell my girl and brother to stay away from him. This person is not a decent person. If one day he drinks too much and commits a crime, then the unlucky one is not the girl and brother. As soon as the words fell, Su Changren, the host, yelled loudly, Zhang Tuzi, you are here, the water for blanching pig hair in this pot has been boiled for several turns. The fiery villagers who were talking in the yard fell silent when they saw the burly and fierce young man striding in. Zhang Fengyuan went into the courtyard and saw that the people in the courtyard were all looking at him. Just now he heard that this side was bustling outside, but when he came in, there was no sound. It was unclear who everyone was talking about. People in the village love to gossip, and it's not just a matter of a day or two. At the beginning, he couldn't hear these people always talking about his parents behind his back, so he went to the city to drink because he was depressed, and he didn't go back to the village every 3 days. After that, Everyone didn't talk much about his parents, but started talking about his idleness. Anyway, it didn't stop. After a lifetime of watching flowers and flowers, he turned around and faced them again. He suddenly felt that it was funny, and it was really not worth it for gossip. "I'm sorry Uncle Su, I was delayed on the road for a while, and the fat pig just dragged it out." Su Changren, a man from the Su family, didn't see much guilt when he heard the words. He quickly called the man who came to hold the pig and dragged the animal out. The boar was so strong that the four men managed to control it. Zhang Fengyuan took out the sharp knife with a silver face and cold light, his eyes sharpened, and he lifted the knife with his hand. Even though he hadn't done this business for many years, his movements were still very skillful. After the pig was bled, the pig's skin was scalded to remove the hair. The man carried the pig onto two long benches. The shaved fat pig was cut into small pieces, and the villagers who wanted to buy meat immediately surrounded him. "What kind of meat do you want, and how many catties do you want? Even if you don't have a scale, Zhang Fengyuan can cut it to a similar weight." Even if the villagers looked down on him no matter how hard they worked, some people couldn't help but say, "Zhang Tu's hands and feet are really nimble." Zhang Fengyuan wiped the blade, "It's all done through practice. This is his craft, otherwise no one would ask him to butcher pigs because of his temper." Although Zhang Fengyuan can estimate the weight, Lu Xianglan, the plump lady of the Su family, is still worried. After all, she has worked so hard to raise the animals for more than half a year. "Come out on the scale, everyone who wants meat come to the scale." "Su Niangzi, it's really good to raise this animal of yours, and the meat is too fat." Lu Xianglan felt proud when she heard this. "That's not true, our livestock used a lot of pig food twice a day and 3 times a day to feed them fat and strong." After working for more than half an hour, most of the owner's pigs were sold. The pigs were fat, and everyone was greedy for the oily taste. Pork was also very easy to sell in the village. Lu Xianglan had a lot of money in her pocket, and she was worried satisfied. After the meat was sold, the women and brothers were busy with the work in the kitchen, and the men who came to help had nothing to do, so they gathered around and played dice with small bets. It was almost Chinese New Year in winter, and there was another meal of meat. "Eat, everyone likes to go and play for a while. Put it away, can you come and have too?" Zhang Fengyuan waved his hand, "I'm going to the latrine, you play first." He got into the house. Su's family is considered a high-ranking family in the village, and they can live without a search. They don't have many houses, but the house passed down from their ancestors is larger and different in structure from Zhang's. His left the threshold on the right of the threshold somehow crossed to the side of a small house. "Brother he, cook the meat quickly, put away the ingredients for the vegetables, and go to the stove to light the fire and have a rest for a while, you have been busy for a long time, let the second sister come." Zhang Fengyuan laughed when he heard Ruanmi's soft voice, "It's all done, what else do you need to do?" Hearing the sound, he couldn't help but tilt his head to see which girl could talk like this, and when he looked up, he saw 2 young people in the room, a girl and a brother. Without stepping forward to ask, he immediately knew who the 2 were. It is said that the Su family has no sons, the eldest died when he was young, and now there is only one girl and younger brother. The second girl, Su Xiaochun, is fair and juicy, and she is well known as a village flower, but the youngest, Su He, is sallow, thin, and poorly made. People in the village always talk too much after dinner and dinner. How can the same parents give birth to 2 very different children? Compared with his sister, He Gear is even more inconspicuous. Zhang Fengyuan looked at the little girl who was standing by the stove with her waist pinched, her pearls and jade were round, her face was white and rosy, her black eyes matched with red cherry lips, she was wearing a delicate royal blue velvet winter coat, she was alive and well like the proud daughter of a rich family. It's no wonder that Chen Si almost swallowed when he mentioned it, but he really has a good appearance. On the other hand, the little brother who was working on the stove by the side, was dressed in a cross-neck linen dress that was stitched together in small steps, wrapped in a bony body, with a scorched yellow face with no flesh, and 2 protruding eyes that were extraordinarily large. But he didn't look very bright, the circles around his eyes were black and blue, his whole body was very grey, like a short and thin little monkey. He was really different from his sister. Steaming the heart and lungs with radishes is so fragrant. I've already prepared the soup. I just need to stir-fry the vegetables. The little brother's tone is light, and his voice is mixed with the hoarseness of the winter cold. It is neither soft like a girl's, nor like the clear and beautiful voice of my brother. Wearing an apron, he was cooking with a spatula in front of the stove, but he was quick to put salt and ingredients into the pot, but the smell of cooking with a few spatulas filled the small stove. Zhang Fengyuan rubbed his chin. The food is really delicious, it can catch up with the best restaurants in the city. Zhang Tuzi. With a sudden cry, Su Shaochun, who was in the room, was startled and picked up an earthen jar nearby. Zhang Fengyuan tilted his head, saw Lu Xianglan hurriedly approaching, and said unhurriedly, "Miss Su, let me find a latrine. On the left-hand side, you just go along the eaves and turn the corner. It is good." Zhang Fengyuan walked to the place she said, and Lu Xianglan got into the stove when she saw that the person had gone far away. Su Shaochun breathed a sigh of relief, put down the earthen jar, and stepped forward to hold Lu Xianglan's arm. "You scared me so much." Lu Xianglan scolded, "You have to be careful to avoid this man, he goes to the city to drink and have fun all day long. I think he is deliberately groping to see you, and even pretending to be looking for a latrine. You girl has such a big heart, didn't even notice. Mother knows that the man's character is not good, so why invite the family over? Where did I call it? It was your father who called him to kill the pigs. Since the old butcher died, he is the only butcher in our village. If you don't call him to kill the pigs, then you have to go to another village to call someone else. Your father said it's too troublesome to do it." Lu Xianglan stopped talking, and then glanced at Su He, who hadn't spoken all this time. "How is the cooking?" "Oh, it's delicious." Su Shaochun saw that when talking about the food, even her mother praised it, and couldn't help but said, "The meat and vegetables are delicious. Brother, he is good at cooking, but the taste is too big. Mother wants me to be in this kitchen. I'm learning from here, but unfortunately, the new clothes my mother made for me in the city are full of smell. You silly girl, I know you don't like to smoke, but there are many customers outside today, so don't take out something to meet them." The mother and daughter talked for a while, then remembered that there was another person in the side stove, turned around and said to Su He, "Brother He, don't go out after the food here is ready, someone will do the cooking and serving, you go back to the house for dinner. It's not that your mother won't let you go out, there are a lot of gossips from the village here today, and they will have to use you to talk to Shao Chun." Su He didn't even lift his eyelids, just nodded his head. No matter if it's someone else's business or his own business, he always arranges like this anyway. The villagers can't eat a few good meals throughout the year. Today, there are some meat dishes. He and others have gone out to eat and add a big bowl of rice. It is more comfortable to eat 2 big spoonfuls of vegetables in the house. Zhang Fengyuan came back from the hut and played a few dice with the men in the village. He was lucky. He won several times in a row, and those who lost were not very happy. The dice were withdrawn. Everyone started setting up and eating lively again. The fried pork liver is so tender, so delicious. After taking a sip of wine, Chen Si praised the stir-fried pork liver with sliced green onions, and all the men at the table moved their chopsticks when they heard this. "It's really tender, it can't be done without a few kung fu." At this moment, Lu Xianglan heard the news and came over. Taking advantage of the time to refill the wine, she pointed her chin at the daughter in the room. "The child is fried, it's not a good thing, everyone, don't laugh at her." Zhang Fengyuan ate with a sullen head, and couldn't help but look up at Lu Xianglan, who was full of smiles when he heard the words. Just now this dish was clearly fried by Su He, who was out of the way. No matter how he served it, it was Su Shaokun's cooking. I've heard about the second daughter of Mrs. Su's family, Shuiling, but I didn't expect her craftsmanship to be so good. If anyone gets married, it would be a great blessing. Immediately a few women joined in. Lu Xianglan couldn't close her mouth from ear to ear, and said, "Everyone knows how to joke." Zhang Fengyuan saw through but didn't say anything, and threw a few pieces of radish into his mouth. This Su family is really interesting. He raised his neck and shamelessly yelled at Lu Xianglan, "Miss Su, if you don't call your girl and brother out for dinner on such a good day, you've been busy around the stove all morning, and you're still hiding it at this time." Ha 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 ha, this can only be said by Zhang Fengyuan. The men at the table picked up Zhang Fengyuan again and started joking. Without letting her mother shout, Su Shaochun actually walked out in response to the chatter and laughter of a group of men, and Shi Shiran said that he would pour wine for the elders who came to eat. Seeing Su Shaochun, who came out with a rosy face, all the men at the table stopped serving food. They were really filial and reasonable. Zhang Fengyuan raised the corners of his mouth, took advantage of this spare time, and picked pork lung slices from the big chopsticks in the bowl by himself. The Su family's cooking skills are good, but after digging and searching, there are not many pieces of meat in a big pot of radish lung slice soup. When the man at the table turned his eyes away from Su Shaochun, Zhang Fengyuan ate up all the meat. After the meal, Zhang Fengyuan, as a butcher, not only got a meal of plain pig soup, but also a piece of pork as a reward from the host's family. Su Changren was quite generous, and gave Zhang Fengyuan 2 catties of fat and thin pork. After he took the things, he didn't keep much, and was about to leave. The ones left on this side are all those who have the idea of the second daughter of the Su family. If he hadn't bumped into the 2 children of the Su family in Pianchu today, seeing Su Shaokun's good looks, and her mother's bragging, he would definitely have missed it. Some fascinated. He shook his head, people need to watch more. He didn't go home directly with the meat, but turned his head and went to the village alcove first. Is Aunt Gan at home? Aunt Gan. Just as he was patting on the courtyard door to call for someone, Zhang Fengyuan saw a woman with a striking silk flower come back twisting her waist from the outside. The woman he called Aunt Gan was called Matchmaker Gan by others, because Zhang Fengyuan's father and the wife's husband were distant cousins, so they were somewhat related. Fengyuan, why did you come here? The Su family killed the New Year pig today, and you didn't go there. Seeing that the door of her own courtyard was slapped by strong and powerful palms, she seemed about to fall backwards into the courtyard. Matchmaker Gan hurriedly called to stop her, and she couldn't help complaining to her man, who would not come to open the door while lying down at home. I came back after dinner. It's not too far from home. I stopped by to see Aunt Gan. Aunt just came back. Matchmaker Gan did not expect that her cousin and nephew would come to make friends with her today. I am also an honest person. Even if he died early, it would be pitiful to leave an only son behind. Yesterday, the wife of the Wang family at the head of the village asked me to show a girl to Dalangxiang of her family. I didn't eat the shaved pig soup from the Su family on my side, and rushed to take care of her business. Zhang Fengyuan said, "It is most appropriate for my aunt to handle these things in our village." Yo, you kid, your mouth is so sweet today. My nephew wants to trouble my aunt with something. Matchmaker Gan immediately understood, you are in a hurry, boy. I was not happy to talk to you 2 years ago. Now that I am tired of drinking, I think it will be more comfortable to ask a wife to support me. Zhang Fengyuan laughed, I'm not too young in the village, just now I saw that the people younger than me were holding dolls in front of me, so I shouldn't be in a hurry. Matchmaker Gan smiled knowingly, being a matchmaker is born to be enthusiastic about gossip, and if someone took the initiative to ask for it, he was naturally enthusiastic in his heart. It's just. Matchmaker Gan looked Zhang Fengyuan up and down. She is talented and skilled. She should be the best one to talk about. It's because of her reputation. I'm afraid things won't be easy to handle. She didn't agree too readily. If there is a suitable aunt, I will call you to see her. Zhang Fengyuan was sincerely asking for help, so he transferred the 2 caddies of meat hanging from his finger to matchmaker Gan, and said in a good voice, "Auntie, please help me." No matter which villager would not be envious of such a large piece of meat, the matchmaker refused, but her hands were deft, and she lifted the meat happily, and her tone became warmer. "My nephew is to be polite, tell your aunt what you like." Zhang Fengyuan thought for a while, as long as it's not like Su Xiaochun. Matchmaker Gan stared at Zhang Fengyuan with wide eyes when she heard the words, "Which single man in this village doesn't want to marry the second girl of Su's family? You didn't say anything against it. My nephew can't afford to support the second girl of the Su family." Zhang Fengyuan laughed. When he said this, matchmaker Gan gave him a high look. "You silly boy can see clearly, but you saved some effort. In short, I don't pick anything, I just want to live a life. Come on, Auntie will compare and match the girls and boys of the right age on hand, go to people's houses to find out what's going on, and come to you if there are signs." When Zhang Fengyuan saw that the most famous matchmaker in 8 villages agreed, he felt more at ease. "Okay, my nephew will just wait for your good news." Matchmaker Gan sent Zhang Fengyuan away, and shook the meat in her hand. This was a good move, and she didn't have to buy pork for the Chinese New Year. She opened the courtyard door, and her man came out of the house. "You dare to respond to anyone's business? If he comes to make trouble when nothing happens, he will make the neighbors look good." Zhang Fengyuan is also good at hands and feet, so maybe he can't be called a daughter-in-law. The man snorted and said, "How many days does he stay in the village in a month? When he comes back, he's like a drunkard. Who knows if he will go crazy and beat people after drinking? His old mother was beaten by his father when he was drunk. Who is willing to give him the girl and brother?" Matchmaker Gan said, "He's not the only bad guy in the village, and that ugly, limp Zhou met a little brother." The man snorted, "Then don't you look at how much money the Zhou family spent to marry him back? 10 taels. Don't talk about emptying out the family's wealth, but make up all the money to borrow it. If there is a famine enough to buy a wife, how much money can Fengyuan spend? Do you know that Zhang's family didn't leave money for Zhang Fengyuan to marry a wife? Zhang's family used to be very wealthy, and uncles in the village were also from the upper class." The words are true, but matchmaker Gan is a little guilty. Even if the Zhang family has a family background, it can't afford Zhang Fengyuan's spending and spending. Nowadays, his reputation is so bad, it's no wonder that Zhang's uncle wants to control Zhang Fengyuan. Besides, when someone else came to ask for a matchmaker, they sent a basket of eggs and a few snacks wrapped in a handkerchief. Who would give such a generous gift before the matter was completed? Even the village chief's family would not be so generous. In the final analysis, a single man can't live a life, so giving so many things can also show the sincerity of asking for a daughter-in-law, and he wants to find someone to take care of him. But after thinking about it, Zhang Fengyuan said that he was indifferent and fierce. Even if he asked his wife to go back, the little wife could still control him. She withdrew her thoughts, and turned to lift up the pork in her hand to save some face in front of her husband. "Look, Zhang Fengyuan gave it to me." Seeing the third line meat, the man swallowed subconsciously. She pursed her mouth, and did not continue to fight on the intuitive meat. Zhang Fengyuan still didn't know that his market was already bad, humming a popular little song in the city, and went home cheerfully. "I don't know that I was fooling around in the city for a few days, and the kitchen at home was covered with dust." It was cold, so he simply lit a fire and boiled a large pot of water to warm the room, and when the water was hot, he could wash the stove and pots. After finishing his errands and coming back, he couldn't help but think that when the matchmaker got a letter and the daughter-in-law got it back, someone would take care of the kitchen. At that time, he will go out to earn money, and his wife doesn't have to do many things so diligently. she just needs to tidy up the house, and he won't have to make a fire by himself when he comes back from the outside. After setting up 2 pieces of dry firewood in the stove, he walked through the middle hall to his bedroom. There was a faint smell of alcohol in the room, where, when he entered the door, he almost tripped over his trousers that were thrown on the ground. I don't know if a cat got into the house or I was drunk and didn't wake up. The carbon basin in the house was also kicked over, and it was thrown upside down in the middle of the house, with extinguished coals and ashes all over the place. Zhang Fengyuan is a rough old man, he is not good at housework, and he is not like a girl who likes to be clean, so he didn't pay attention to it earlier. Seeing this scene now, he can't help but feel bad. He stepped to the edge of the bed, pushed away the long wooden bench beside the bed, pried up 2 floor tiles, and pulled out a small solid wooden box from the bottom. Hastily opened the box. I saw a few pieces of broken silver lying alone in the box, and a silver bracelet with a mandarin duck carved with Ruyi Xiang pattern on the outside. 5 taels of broken silver, and 4 taels of silver bracelets. That is to say, except for some loose money and things that can be sold for money, this is the only savings in the family. Both father and mother are hard-working and willing to do hard work. Although they don't know how to run a business, the couple still saved a lot of money for him. Zhang Fengyuan remembered that after his parents were gone, when the box that stored the family's belongings came to him, there were 20 taels of silver in it. After wandering around for the past 2 years, most of the family's life savings were just spent, and nothing decent was left behind. 1 did not repair and expand the house, 2 did not buy household items, and 3 did not get married and have children. He hugged the box and sighed slightly. The bracelet must not be moved, it was his mother's dowry back then, and he was also asked to leave it to his daughter-in-law as a bride price in the future, not to his mother's family, but to make jewelry for his daughter-in-law. This also means that there are only 5 taels of silver at his disposal. As far as daily expenses are concerned, it is already a large amount of money. It must be known that after paying taxes and corvée for a year, the upper reaches of the village households can have 2,000 yuan or 2 taels of silver left over. As long as he doesn't go to the city to eat, drink and have fun, and controls his wasteful habits a little bit, he still won't spend much money. It's just that there are important things to do right now, and he doesn't know the price of marriage proposals. After all, he can't go around borrowing money to marry someone back and pay back the money with himself. That's too shabby, and he can't do it. Besides, he has a bad reputation now, and his uncles don't want to see him, who would lend him money. Maybe they think he is lying about borrowing money to have fun. The dog shook his head when he saw the situation. Zhang Fengyuan slammed the box shut. Money can't be saved, he still has to earn it, he's good at it, isn't he afraid that he won't be able to earn money? Having made up his mind, he tidied up the inside and outside of the house. If it was a hot day, he would also like to use hot water to scald all the places in the house, but in winter, the weather is cold and grey, and if the house is not dry for a long time, it will easily smell of water and mildew. After daybreak the next day, Zhang Fengyuan was carrying a large basket made of bamboo strips, which contained some hunting tools and a sharp long-handled sickle. Go to the main road at the entrance of the village and go in the direction of the city, but go to the back mountain of the village along the narrow path. Before it snowed and the weather was not too cold, he went to the mountain to chop some firewood and come back. He could make firewood for the stove and burn some charcoal for the 12th lunar month. In addition, go up and down the mountain to point traps, and try your luck to bring something back. In this season, there are slightly more people going up the mountain than usual. After the autumn harvest, the fields are idle, and they can at least order seasonal vegetables. The crops cannot be grown, and the farmers are idle. The land can be idle, but people can't be idle. After all, they have to eat. People in the village either pick the vegetables from the field and sell them in the city, or find some casual jobs to do. The Jizhu village where they live is far away from the county seat, and it takes several hours to go back and forth. It is unrealistic to carry the burden to sell vegetables, and there are very few people in the village who sell vegetables. As for casual workers, during the slack season, there is a lot of labor, it is difficult to find work, and the wages are lower than before. In comparison, there are naturally more people going up the mountain, whether it is hunting and chopping firewood, or digging wild vegetables, there is always something to do. However, Jeju village is surrounded by mountains on all sides, and there are mountain roads everywhere. This is why more people go up the mountain in winter to find a way out, but they may not be able to meet people. Only across the mountains and forests, they can hear the sound of chopping firewood from the opposite side. Zhang Fengyuan swung his long-handled sickle all the way, and the weeds and vines covered with mist were cut down by the roadside a few times. When he got up the mountain, a clear mountain path was cut out. After entering the mountain, he walked all the way to the deep mountain area, installed small animal traps, and dug holes to put iron nail boards. These guys are really good hunters, and the iron is precious, and ordinary people don't have it. In order to buy these iron lumps, all the meat and pigs he got from slaughtering animals were exchanged for money, and he bought damaged iron from the village at a low price and went to the iron shop in the city to beat them out. He didn't save a dime before. Next, I bought all these things. Su Shi was born with a strong physique, and his favorite things are these cold iron objects. Other people's treasures may be gold and silver, but his are knives, sickles, clips, nails, iron chains, and so on. Fortunately, I spent my money on buying these things before. If I had saved the money, I would have spent it earlier. These tools can support me anyway. After placing the traps, he marked each trap so that it would be convenient to return to collect the cages, and it also prevented the villagers from accidentally falling into the traps when they went up the mountain. After doing this, he went out to the deep mountains to cut firewood, so as not to scare the prey out to eat. He had only been able to walk for 2 hours before a figure stealthily went to see the marked trap. In summer, it is eroded by heavy rains, and the big and old trees that have been knocked down by lightning have almost dried up in autumn and winter. Zhang Fengyuan was so strong, he chopped off the branches of the wood thicker than the waist, collected it and carried it to the edge of the mountain pass to pile it up for chopping firewood. He picks and chooses. The straight and smooth logs are generally reluctant to be split to make firewood. This kind of wood can be saved as wood for building a house and repairing a barn in the future, and someone will take it to the wood yard. Bad and strong, it can be exchanged for 10 to 30 coins. Although selling the picked wood can make money, it is a kind of luck and a lot of physical exertion. Villagers who don't have Zhang Fengyuan's physique generally don't make this money, because they carry wood for sale every year. Broken waist, crooked feet, injured muscles, and bones. Occasionally, I want to improve my food and buy a caddy of meat to eat. However, there are young and strong men who carry 2 trees from the village to the woodyard to sell. In half an hour, Zhang Fengyuan found a dozen pieces of wood, and only 2 of them were of good material, and the others were crooked and unsaleable. He took out a hatchet and an axe from the back basket, and chopped the bad wood into small pieces on the spot, or split it directly. Chopping firewood is tiring, even if you don't wear 2 pieces specially in winter, you can sweat all over in just a quarter of an hour. There was no one around, so Zhang Fengyuan simply took off his clothes and hung them on a branch beside him, thinking in his heart that when he went to slaughter a few more animals, he would exchange the money for a saw. Too tired to use axes and hatchets. He was thinking of better tools here, but he didn't know that his own knives and axes were enough to make others envious, and Suhi, who came to collect firewood from the small road and mountain, only had a blunt sickle with a lame blade. Suhi held the back rope hanging on his shoulders with both hands. The rope as thick as his thumb was fine when the back basket was not loaded. A piece of flesh was strangled by the back rope. For this reason, when he goes up the mountain, he will deliberately collect layers of soft coats on the palm trees. If there are too many layers, he can take them home and sew them into a back rope half a palm wide, which can reduce a lot of pressure on the load. However, He had just replaced the back pan he used to use with a new back rope, and his mother took it for use. He had to use a back pan with a thin back rope, so he went up to the mountain to pick up some firewood. He was in a trance thinking about whether he could collect more palm tree coats today. When he pricked up his ears, he heard the sound of chopping firewood, one after another, as if he had inexhaustible strength, which made him quicken his pace. Everyone likes to pull firewood to the hillside for chopping or loading. Firstly, it is close to the way down the mountain, so it is easy to go down the mountain. Secondly, this side is more open and bright, so you can always pay attention to the time and weather. Like a stubborn snail, Suhi managed to climb up the hill with a basket much bigger than his own body. Before he could catch his breath, a tall man with a shirtless body and swinging an axe suddenly pierced his eyes. The man stood beside the pile of firewood like a rock that could not be blown by the wind. His exposed back and arms were wheat-colored and bronze-colored. When he exerted his strength, the veins on his arms swelled up. It seemed that he was fully charged. Roll. I don't know how long I have been up the mountain, but the firewood cut at my feet is as high as the hill. Suhi took a deep breath, averted his eyes belatedly, and almost tripped over a stone in a panic. Zhang Fangyuan heard a sound behind him, and while wiping his sweat, he turned his head and saw that it was the youngest of the Su family. The little brother walked lightly with his face sideways, not wanting to make any noise to disturb others. His appearance was very similar to a little black and thin monkey. He was clearly considered tall among the brothers of the same age in the village, but he was too thin and frail. Not as good as those short chirps. There are not many men in the village from a good family background, so that they are stunted and are not tall, so the younger brother is too tall, but he is not very popular among men in the village. Standing next to him is about the same size as me, without the feeling of being a small bird. Few men will be good at this, but generally the family likes a big brother. This kind of work is amazing. Zhang Fangyuan greeted each other friendlily, brother he. The little black thin monkey raised its head when he heard the words, but he was still walking, but when he saw the person's face, his breath was stagnant, and he didn't answer, and trotted into the mountain. Zhang Fangyuan looked at the younger brother's back, and heard people say that the youngest Su not only looks very different from his sister, but also has a temper that is not comparable to his sister. He is weird and withdrawn. Most of them don't say a word, just like someone owes money to his family. The temper is cold and smelly, like this little brother who wants to be colorless and can't speak to be flattering. How will he marry in the future? Most likely he will stay at home as an old brother and pay late wedding tax. He shook his head and looked back, and suddenly saw the cloth lapel hanging on the branch. His arms felt cold, and suddenly realized that he was not wearing any clothes. He touched the tip of his nose resentfully, and greeted the folks out of good intentions, which seemed more like a joke in their eyes. After chopping firewood, Zhang Fangyuan carried 2 good logs back home. It was already past noon after the 2 trips. He ate a pancake and drank some water, and went up the mountain again. Now there are more branches and firewood on the hillside, as well as the small branches that he shaved from the big tree trunk before, and piled them on the other side of his firewood pile, without even thinking that Suhi picked them up firewood. Now that no one has been seen, Su went to look for firewood again. Seeing that the sky was turning cloudy and it was about to rain, Zhang Fangyuan planned to check the traps before returning to collect them. If there was anything, he had to take back his hunting tools. Tools can't stay overnight on the mountain. There are many people going up the mountain recently. It's not a big deal if you don't catch something. Losing the hunting tools is not worth the loss. He first filled a large basket with chopped firewood, but there was too much firewood to fit in the basket, so he thought he had to chop some banana leaves to cover the pile of firewood, otherwise the firewood would be soaked by the rain. It's not easy to go downhill. When he picked up the sickle and was about to look for banana leaves, he saw Suhi, who was wearing a palm coat and holding firewood in his arms, looking at him not far away, as if hesitating to talk to him. Zhang Fengyuan thought that the youngest Su was looking at the sky about to rain, and wanted him to pack the remaining dry firewood, and it was pitiful to see the little brother, so he said, "It's raining, you need to chop firewood and put it in a basket. Some time later, the mountain road will be soaked and it will not be easy to go down the mountain, and I will pretend that the rest is enough for you to pick up a basket." He saw that the butcher looked a little gentler than before when he was fully dressed, and was a little surprised that Zhang Fengyuan would give him firewood, but he didn't go up to ask for it, but he used his blunt sickle to chop the firewood with great effort. Seemingly unconcerned, "Did you dig the trap over the wild chestnut tree?" Zhang Fengyuan heard the hoarse voice he heard at Su's house yesterday, and raised his eyebrows. "Well, is it in stock?" He continued to chop his firewood, but said, "I saw someone over there who seemed to be digging a trap." Zhang Fengyuan paused when he heard the words, and realized that something was wrong, and quickly rushed into the deep mountain with his sickle. He raised his eyebrows when he saw the person running like the wind, and decided to follow after a while. Just now, he went to a place deeper in the mountains to collect palm tree coats, and saw a man digging the weeds and leaves covering the trap from a long distance away. It's not surprising to see hunters in the mountains, and he didn't want to speak out to control others, but the man's behavior was sneaky, digging for a while and then looking around vigilantly, just like a thief. He felt that something was wrong, but I can't go forward and scold others. Those who are deep in the mountains and old forests are lucky to be bitten back. If they meet someone who has no conscience, they may have any evil intentions. He carefully retreated to the Shanping side, and seeing Zhang Fengyuan came back, he was hesitating whether to take the initiative to talk to him and ask if he set up the trap. Even an ordinary man would not want to talk to anyone if he had nothing to do, let alone it was a man of Zhang Fengyuan's reputation. But when he was hesitating, Zhang Fengyuan opened his mouth first, meaning to give him firewood, so he enthusiastically meddled in his own business for once. Zhang Fengyuan is a fast runner, and when he entered the deep mountain and approached his trap, he took a light step. There is really a thief poking his and trying to use a tree branch to fork the iron nails in the trap. It's a coincidence. With a bang, Zhang Fengyuan kicked the thief, and he was immediately kicked to the ground by the sudden kick. He stared at the butcher who was tall and strong with a fierce face, and immediately hugged the kicked stomach. They didn't dare to howl, "Forgive me, Butcher Zhang, please forgive me." Zhang Fengyuan hated these unclean hands and feet the most. He was short and pulled the slightly pudgy man by his back collar and picked him up, knowing that it belongs to me and stealing from me. "The most shameless, it's just you bastards, this trap mark is not made for you to spot the thief. If the hunters are scared by you and don't set up a mark, the villagers who go up the mountain and fall into it will blame you for your dirty hands and feet. I don't think you should keep those good hands and feet who don't do serious things." After saying that, Zhang Fengyuan threw the man on the ground, stepped on the man's wrist, and swung the hatchet at the man's hand to cut it off. There was only a sharp scream resounding through the forest, and the frightened forest was full of mountain birds flying away. "Ah, ah, my hand, my hand!" Zhang Fengyuan looked at the wet crotch of the man on the ground, and stared in horror at the hatchet that had been chopped into his hand only a few centimeters away, crying and howling in fright. Su Hexen, who was hiding far behind, also raised his throat. Zhang Fengyuan's iron-blooded wrist, not to mention, frightened the thief. Even he was so shocked that his back was covered in cold sweat. It is said that the butcher is fierce. Before, he only thought that slaughtering animals was decisive, but after thinking about it, if he slaughtered too many animals, who knows if he will kill people if he is provoked. He didn't finish the follow-up, and his legs went back to Shanping with some weakness. "Next time you dare to do such a sneaky thing, you won't be lucky this time." Zhang Fengyuan kicked the thief in disgust. "Hurry up and get out." The man didn't dare to show his anger. He got up from the ground with lingering fear, his body was dripping with cold sweat, and repeatedly kowtowed to Zhang Fengyuan for mercy. I dare not again, I will never go up the mountain again." After saying that, Zhang Fengyuan was afraid that he would go back on giving him 2 fists, so he ran away in a hurry. Zhang Fengyuan spat. Some days, some hunters always said that they lost their prey and hunting tools. They thought it was a blind bear in the deep mountains. For a while, people were so panicked that they dared not go up the mountain to hunt casually. It's this dog who is doing bad things. He counted his hunting tools. Fortunately, he arrived in time and did not lose them, but he didn't catch a thin pheasant. There are many people hunting in winter, even professional hunters, who half-heartedly want to go up the mountain to improve their food. Anyway, with less prey and greater competition, it is naturally more difficult to get things. Zhang Fengyuan was not disappointed. He packed up his things and went back. Seeing Su he was still cutting firewood in the mountain. The trees were lush in the mountains, but when the trees were sparse in the mountains, it was obvious that there was a drizzle. The rain in winter is not impatient, but cold. The rain falling on the neck is cold, and the wind blowing is even colder. The broken hair between Su He's forehead was wet and stuck to his face, and there was a layer of hoarfrost on the top of his head. He stopped his movements when he heard the movement behind him, and saw Zhang Fengyuan raised his eyebrows and glanced at him. As if he was a little angry, he suddenly strode towards this side. The slender figure brought the cold wind and cold rain, and the moment Su He was stunned, the man stretched his arms and walked along the pannier at his feet. What are you doing? I heard that this butcher is not a good person, but I didn't know that he would bully a little brother. Even if the thief was late and stole his things and didn't catch anyone, then he shouldn't take the resentment on him. Su He clenched the corners of his clothes tightly, even though the fear in his heart was too far from Zhang Fengyuan's strength to get any good fruit, he still didn't show a cowardly expression. He stepped on the small wild haystacks that were soaked by the rain, aggressively chasing the man 1 step at a time when he took 2 steps, and stretched out his hands to grab the back basket back. Zhang Fengyuan ignored Su He's moaning, and stooped to stuff the chopped firewood into the back pan, just wanting to fill the back pan and go down the mountain quickly, but he heard the noisy people behind him. He paused and turned his head. He was stunned for a moment, and Su He threw himself flat on the ground. Why are you so anxious? I won't eat your back basket. He hurriedly put down the things in his hands, and wanted to go over to help him up, but Su He gritted his teeth and got up first, staggering a few steps. The 2 of them saw at the same time that the ball of trousers at the knee was scratched, and a wooden branch was torn through. A large piece of flesh, blood oozing out with mud. Su He frowned, and limped to sit down on the side stone pier. Regardless of the fact that the stone had already been wet by the rain, he quickly pulled a piece of cloth from the hem of his jacket, and simply wiped it. The wound didn't even groan, and both hands wrapped the knees like zongzi. Zhang Fengyuan on the side was surprised by his quick movements, but he looked like a bear. Han Xiang looked at the pair of thin-soled cloth shoes that had been patched on the little brother's feet. The main culprit for the half of the fall was the out-of-season shoes, and the half was because he took the other's back basket. Can you still go? Su He was covered in filth, and he glanced at Zhang Fengyuan slightly. He knew that he was not only embarrassed but also embarrassed, but he didn't feel embarrassed when he thought that he was not the second sister who needed to maintain a perfect image in front of men. He didn't want to reply to Zhang Fengyuan's words, so he got up and wanted to bring back the basket and pack less firewood. He never thought about the sharp pain in his knees, let alone carrying firewood. On a rainy day, he might even go down the mountain. Difficult thing. I'm still thinking about firewood. If I don't have this kind of firewood at home, I won't be able to cook tonight. Zhang Fengyuan also saw the embarrassment under the stubborn surface. He pushed the back basket. I will carry you down the mountain. Su He was obviously frightened by Zhang Fengyuan's words, and his legs and feet became even more difficult for a while. It took him a long time to remember 2 words, no need. Then I'll go down the mountain to find your father to pick you up. Su He silently didn't answer. His father was busy with other things, so he didn't have time to take care of him. Zhang Fengyuan didn't intend to really leave the person on the mountain and go down to the Su family to find someone. Let alone the Su family, it's raining heavily. He knew what people were worrying about, and he emptied all the firewood that had just been put into the pannier. Don't be stubborn, come into the pannier and go down the mountain. Seeing that the butcher was about to carry him in a basket, Su He said, then your firewood and the basket. Zhang Fengyuan glanced at Su He, is firewood more important than people? Su He's ears twitched when he heard this. He said something that was ambiguous. Su He squatted in the back basket, his knees were bent and felt a little painful. Following the man's pace, he also wobbled, which was a little funny. It is easy to think of the scene of buying piglets from someone who has given birth to a sow and carrying them back. He just went to recite it, and now he seems to be that little pig. Little Pig hugged Zhang Fengyuan's precious iron bumps, and looked down at the man walking steadily on the muddy path. Perhaps his feet were big, and every step was solid. Although he was curled up in the back basket, he was not comfortable, but he was steady. It's more reassuring than walking by yourself. He wondered how strong this man was, and he didn't even frown when he was carrying him behind his back, as if he was punching empty-handed. Wrong way. Su He suddenly came back to his senses, and noticed with sharp eyes that the butcher was going down another path. Although it was also the path down the mountain, it was a long way around and full of weeds. No one had walked it for a long time. Zhang Fengyuan said in a deep voice, it's easy to meet people on the right road, but this road is a bit off, but no one walks. Su He was startled, then closed his mouth. Didn't it mean that Zhang Fengyuan was a promiscuous person, drinking flower wine in the city? How can you be so considerate for others? On the contrary, this made him feel a little uneasy, so don't try to lure him to the city to sell him. However, with his appearance, he shouldn't be able to sell him. As soon as he was thinking wildly, he was carried to the place at the foot of the mountain where it meets the main road without realizing it. Zhang Fengyuan stopped walking. It will only take a quarter of an hour to get to your house. It's okay if I take you to the door, but if someone bumps into you, or your parents don't want to see you. Su He hurriedly said, I'll go back by myself. Hearing the sound, the man put the back basket down. He had been bent in the back bag for too long, his legs were sore and painful, he gritted his teeth and stood up, but he couldn't get out of the back bag. He was a little embarrassed. The person standing beside him, he raised his bent arm toward him. Su He glanced at the man, lowered his eyes slightly, grabbed his elbow, and used his strength to get out of the basket. Go home. Although the rain at the foot of the mountain was less than that on the mountain, the two of them were still mostly wet. Su He didn't stay long, hung his pannier on his back, returned all the butcher's iron bumps, and limped towards his home. When Zhang Fengyuan saw that the black and thin figure was about to merge with the rain, he turned around and was about to go back. He heard a thank you in the sound of the drizzle. When he turned back again, Su He only looked at it briefly. He glanced at it and turned away again. He touched his nose, and this thank you made him even more embarrassed. On the way to his small courtyard, Zhang Fengyuan arrived home in less than a quarter of an hour. He didn't lock the courtyard door when he went out. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he saw a 7 or 8-year-old brother walking under the eaves of his house, and said cautiously, Cousin Awan, you are back. Zhang Fengyuan put down the iron lump he brought back. Xiao Mao, why are you here? I'll bring some food to my cousin. Seeing that his cousin was still talking today, Zhang Xiao Mao was not so scared, and showed Zhang Fengyuan the big basket he brought over. There are some seasonal vegetables in it, such as radish, cabbage, and pepper. It is common for every household in the village to have them, but he always ran to the city at first, and he hasn't dug the land since spring plowing. The land at home has been abandoned. There is no food at all. Your father sent it here. Xiao Mao nodded. Father said that if my cousin has no food to eat, he can go to the field to pick it by himself. Zhang Fengyuan frowned and there was a smile on the corner of his mouth. When his parents were alive, his fourth uncle's family was the best for him. When he went out to wander around, the fourth uncle came to grab his ears and scold him, but unfortunately he didn't listen, and even had a fight with the National People's Congress, which made the fourth uncle angry. After that, he stayed away from home all day in the city. I couldn't find him either, and when he returned to the village one year, he found out that his fourth uncle hurt his foot when he went up the mountain, and the tetanus was gone. His fourth aunt hated him and kept seeing him behind closed doors. Xiao Mao later married and went elsewhere. These things have always been the most regrettable in his heart. Looking up at the young brother, his eyes were soft, he touched his head, and said with a smile, "Your father is not angry with me anymore." Not long ago, he ran to the city, and before leaving, he also had a quarrel with his fourth uncle, and now he asked Xiao Mao to bring food, and it seemed that his anger had subsided. Xiao Mao pursed his lips. His father didn't scold his cousin less at home, but how could he really hate this person? If he really hated him, he wouldn't often say, "Father loves Tang the most." "Brother, how could I be angry with you?" Zhang Fengyuan laughed, "You are getting better at talking. What are you having at home tonight?" Xiao Mao thought for a while. "Mother said that it's raining today and I have nothing to do, so I want pancakes." "It's so good, I'll go over and eat some pancakes too." Zhang Fengyuan called Xiao Mao into the room, looked up at the only half-smoked pig's head hanging on the stove, he put a stool and took it down. "Also, I don't know if this pig's head meat is broken, I'll take it to your house to have a look." Zhang Fengyuan put on a bamboo hat, carried the pig's head, and went with Xiao Mao to his fourth uncle Zhang Xishan's house. "Leave it far away." Mrs. He was washing radishes under the eaves. When she looked up, she saw one big and one small walking towards the yard. She wiped her hands quickly, and got up to meet them with a smile. Zhang Fengyuan called out, "Si auntie." He handed the pig's head to the woman, looked up and looked into the room. "My fourth uncle is not at home." "It's in the house." Mrs. He didn't say much to Zhang Fengyuan, and directly put down the pig's head, with a smile in the corner of his eyes. "I made a stew with you too, and it's just a rainy night for dinner." The voice was not loud, and the people inside seemed to be seriously eavesdropping on the conversation outside the wall. "Give him some wine, if you haven't had enough in the city, come home to drink." The two looked into the room together, and after Zhang Fengyuan exchanged glances with his fourth aunt, he raised his legs and entered the room. Sitting on a cushioned chair in the nave was a middle-aged man with a yellow complexion, probably because he was often anxious in life, and there was already a deep gully between his brows. Zhang Fengyuan's fourth uncle is not very old, only in his early 30s, but the farmer looks old, he already looks in his 40s. The man has a bluffing face, and his figure is not as strong and tall as Zhang Fengyuan, but he has experienced decades of wind, frost, rain, and snow, and his aura is very overwhelming. "Uncle Si. You still know that when I come back, I will die drunk in the city, and I will not leave home during the Chinese New Year." Zhang Xishan hasn't seen Zhang Fengyuan for more than half a month. Ever since his parents passed away, this kid has become very eccentric. He was messing around in the city, not to mention coming to his house, and he didn't spend much time in the village. After finally seeing someone come over on his own initiative today, he also wanted to speak softly, but when he didn't want to speak, he choked on people. Zhang Fengyuan didn't get angry either, and sat down on the side with a cheeky face. The hero didn't mention the bravery back then, and didn't answer his fourth uncle's angry words. He picked what the elders liked to hear and said, "Yesterday, I asked Aunt Gan I say matchmaker. I heard what your aunt said." Zhang Xishan didn't know that he had returned to the village until he heard this, and asked Xiao Mao to deliver something today. "Your aunt was sheltering from the rain at whose house, and happened to meet matchmaker Gan. Every family says kiss. When a man gets married at an old age, it becomes a pimple in the hearts of the elders." Zhang Fengyuan went to ask a matchmaker, which is a sign of stability. Zhang Xishan was very happy when he heard the news. Zhang Fengyuan also became interested. Aunt Gan is talking about the Hu family under the big locust tree at the east end of the village. Seeing the light in his nephew's eyes, Zhang Xishan sighed in his heart. Today, the matchmaker came to Hu's house to talk about marriage. It was not mentioned that Zhang Fengyuan was very enthusiastic and willing to talk to each other when he asked for marriage. When the matchmaker revealed who was asking for marriage, she immediately refused to meet each other, and even said yes in front of Mrs. He. A harsh word came. The daughter of our old Hu's family is not worried about marrying a second-rate son as a daughter-in-law and husband. Is Zhang Fengyuan someone who can get along with him? There are no parents to take care of you at the top, and the one below is useless. Matchmaker Gan, you treat our Hu family as a fool? Our Hu family has never treated you badly. How much does this kind of relationship despise our Hu family? If you want me to say that anyone's baby will be unlucky to marry in the past, how much benefit did this Fang Yuan give you to come to our house to say kiss? He listened, his face flushed with embarrassment, and he came back drenched in the rain without hiding. Naturally, Zhang Xishan would not tell his nephew these ugly words. He said it very tactfully, fearing that it would hurt Zhang Fengyuan's hard-won serious thoughts. It's not just about the Hu family. Anyone who is of marriageable age should go and talk about it. See, both sides have to have that intention. Looking at his fourth uncle's dignified expression, Zhang Fengyuan knew that the conversation was not very pleasant, and he had a certain understanding of his own market situation. Talking about marriage is simple, just like the scholar Fei's family, as long as their family informs the matchmaker, and the safekeeping is that the girl and brother entrust the matchmaker to come to their house to ask, and the scholar's family agrees to the marriage. But it's hard to say, just like him, he has to find out who is willing to go to the matchmaker's family. It's a trivial matter to be ridiculed by people, and what's more, he is even afraid of being kicked out. Don't worry, your second aunt found out about this and brought a basket of eggs to beg matchmaker Gan. She will definitely be able to tell you a suitable and appropriate one. The trouble may be more troublesome than other families, but you are also weak. When you are old, don't blame the folks for speaking badly if you are fooling around. In life, you have to be responsible for what you have done. Zhang Fengyuan nodded, I know. Seeing that people are being sincere today, Zhang Xishan softened his tone and said, if he is kind, it's okay to give more gifts. You know that Sibo doesn't have a son, so you don't have to worry about dowry gifts. If money is tight, Sibo will find a way for you. If you really can't find it in the village, it doesn't matter if you go to another village to find it. This wife and husband can't find it casually. It's a matter of a lifetime. As long as you get down to earth in the future, you will be no worse than any man in the village. Zhang Fengyuan felt hot in his heart, took a long breath slowly, and responded. After dinner, Mrs. He packed the remaining pork head meat for Zhang Fengyuan and let him take it home to eat. How could Zhang Fengyuan have the nerve to take it over and over? Forget it, come to eat again in 2 days. Zhang Fengyuan responded with a smile. 2 days later, Zhang Fengyuan was burning charcoal in the yard when matchmaker Gan came to the door. Oh, why did you pile up the firewood at the door? Zhang Fengyuan was messing around in the house. When he heard a yell from outside, he put down his work and went out. Matchmaker Gan was standing at the gate of the courtyard, guarding the firewood outside and said, Put it far away, how do you pile the firewood outside? He really didn't know when there was a pile of firewood next to the gate of the courtyard. Zhang Fengyuan went out to welcome him. He tilted his head and glanced left and right outside the yard, but he didn't see any clues. I haven't had time to clean up the firewood I picked up. He smiled and said, Aunt Gan, sit down quickly. Zhang Fengyuan led people into the middle hall, served stools and poured tea. Matchmaker Gan was very satisfied with his attentiveness. Nephew, to put it bluntly, I have worked hard for you. Matchmaker Gan sat down unceremoniously, and Niu took a sip of tea. If it weren't for the 2 caddies of meat being stewed by the man for a tooth sacrifice when it was mentioned at home, and being scolded by the Hu family, she would have given up on this job. After working as a matchmaker for so many years, it was the first time he was scolded so harshly. The He family sent another basket of eggs, so she had to run to a few more cheeky houses. After gaining some confidence, although she was also angered by the yin and yang, fortunately, she was not as swearing as the Hu family. I don't go to Hu's house to talk about matchmaking anymore. The marriage can't be said to be benevolent. The folks in the village don't look up and look down. They really don't know how to be human. Thank you for your hard work, Aunt Gan. When things are done, you will be rewarded with a big red envelope. Matchmaker Gan waved her hand. Forget it, it doesn't depend on your favor, it also depends on your parents' respect. Just keep in mind that this time it was the Guang family who agreed this time. They have many children, and the 5th girl is the right age. I took a look and found that she has good features and a demure temperament. She is a virtuous and good housekeeper. You pack it neatly, bring some gifts and go to see your aunt. If the 2 parties are suitable, then the matter will be settled. Zhang Fengyuan felt hot, but he still asked cautiously, the Guang family? But that family on the border of the village. Matchmaker Gan nodded. This family moved to their village a few years ago. Because they lived on the other side of the border, they did not have close contact with the villagers in the village. If they could not find a suitable family in this village, I was about to go to the neighboring village to ask about it, and when I passed by Guang's house, I remembered that there was still such a family. The Guang family lived in poverty and had many children. There were 6 or 7 children around. Gan matchmaker didn't see all of them. She only saw the one of the right age. Now that the Guang family and the couple are getting older, the tax money paid by the larger family members, it's terrible, and I am also in a hurry to marry off the child. The laws of the Dachong dynasty have stipulated that every female brother who does not marry between the ages of 15 and 30 will have to double the head tax. Originally, the money is calculated per person per year, which is 120 cash. If the female brother arrives for unmarried persons of marriageable age, the tax money will double as they get older, and the highest will reach the high of 5. This also means that if there is a late married woman or younger brother in the family alone may have to pay a tax of 600 yuan at most, which is less than 1 tael of silver. If it is not for a very good family people, who can bear to pay taxes like this? Matchmaker Gan came to the door and said that although the Guang family heard that it was Zhang Fengyuan, although he hesitated a little, they were still willing to meet each other. Auntie specifically inquired about the dowry with you. The dowry in our village is not considered high. Ordinary people's 3 or 5 taels of silver is decent. This Guang family is also very open-minded. There is no dowry. Your aunt thinks I have a lot to say about this, and we will negotiate at this price when the time comes. Zhang Fengyuan was very grateful to the matchmaker for being so caring, and said a lot of good things. Matchmaker Gan also ate the tea cheerfully. She looked around the Zhang family out of the corner of her eyes. The last time she came here was to eat the funeral wine. It has been several years. At that time, the Zhang family was well organized. Come here now, weeds are growing in the yard, and although there are traces of tidying up the house, it is not as meticulous as the little girls tidying up, and there is still dust on the tables and stools. Isn't that what a bachelor's house is like? But it is also difficult for Zhang Fengyuan, who is a butcher with rough hands and feet, and has to spare his hands to handle these delicate tasks. It is considered good to be able to reach this point. Okay, my aunt brought you the news, so I won't sit around and delay you this morning. Hurry up and get ready to go to Guang's family to see it. If the matter is resolved sooner, Auntie will get your happy money sooner, right? Matchmaker Gan smiled and said goodbye. Zhang Fengyuan sent the person to the door, looked at the firewood beside the courtyard door with his hips on his hips, and shook his head helplessly. This is the youngest Su. The legs and feet healed so quickly? I can go up the mountain to collect firewood again. He carried all the firewood into the house, packed it up and locked the door, turned around and went to his fourth uncle's house again. What are you doing with me? Can't you do it without work in the field? I'll go to the city with you to have a look, so that I can know what gifts to bring to a blind date. It will also come in handy when I propose. The next day Zhang Fangyuan was going to the city early in the morning to buy things for a marriage proposal, and Chen Si came to pester him early in the morning. How did you know? Chen Si pursed his lips and said, Gan's matchmaker talked about so many families in the village, and other families may only show off that the matchmaker went to their house to propose a kiss to the girl and brother, and would not say who it was, but went to whose house. Can you manage that big mouth? Most of the village knew in the afternoon that you Zhang Fangyuan asked the matchmaker to talk about your marriage. I saw matchmaker Gan go to your house again yesterday. I know it must be talking about others. You are too mean, you are doing such a big thing and you still hide it from me and don't talk to me. Zhang Fangyuan strode towards the entrance of the village. You are younger than me, and you are not in a hurry to get married. Maybe you still want to compete with me to say that girls and brothers are not good enough. I'm only 1 or 2 years younger than you, and I'm already old enough to get married. Zhang Fangyuan said, you don't seem to have a bad reputation, since you can get married, why wait? Chen Si sighed, isn't my third brother not married yet? What my parents mean is that no matter how anxious you are, you can't pass your brother. When the third brother is done, it will be my turn. Zhang Fangyuan thought that the Chen family was quite pedantic. It seems that a family with many brothers and sisters is lively, and there are also many uncomfortable places. An only child like him is also good. Then you should look after the person first, and when your third brother gets married, you can go directly to propose marriage. I think so too. After finishing speaking, Chen Si turned around and said, you haven't even met the girl from the Guang family, and you will get married if you see the right one. Are you really not looking for someone you like? Zhang Fangyuan also thought about this problem at night, but not to mention now, he has never thought about these things in his previous life, and now he wants to get married quickly. After all, he is not young now, and he does not have his own. What I like, our village is much better. You can see each other before you get married. It's not like the rules and etiquette in the city. It's all about the parents' order and the matchmaker's words. The marriage can only be seen on the night of the marriage. People, don't ask for so much anymore. After getting married, he has to work to earn money. Chen Si scratched his head, it's true. Zhang Fangyuan looked at Chen Si and smiled, but if you have the opportunity to look good to yourself, don't miss the opportunity. I missed it at the age when I was supposed to look good to you. Now I can only do this. Chen Si responded. Hey! Master, wait, take a car. Zhang Fangyuan raised his head and saw a bull cart pulling people on the official road, so he waved quickly. Chen Si stepped forward and grabbed the man, I'm not in a hurry to go to the city. We're fast and we'll be there in just over an hour. Why spend this money? Then you can go on foot, I'll take the car. Zhang Fangyuan straddled his legs and got on the cart. Look at you in a hurry, it's like running away when you arrive late. Chen Si hurriedly chased after him. Today is the day to go to the market in the city. There are more people entering the city than usual, and there are many people carrying things on their backs on the official road. The way to earn money in winter is not as busy as farming. The villagers hold their money tightly. Even the ox cart master's sports car money is not easy to earn. Zhang Fangyuan and Chen Ck are 4 people on the cart. They are not familiar with each other, so it is not a village. Of Zhang Fangyuan faced Tai Shat, his eyebrows were high and thick, his face was sharp and angular, and his figure was tall and not angry. After getting into the car, the women who were talking in a low voice were all silent, and the whole car was quiet. Everyone's ox cart stops at Zijiao village ahead, and I'll go to the entrance of the village to get something. The bullock cart master spoke, and everyone responded without objection. When Zhang Fengyuan was bored, the ox cart stopped under a big pine tree, and the master jumped off the cart and ran to get the goods quickly. Zhang Fengyuan lifted his long legs and got off the cart. The cart was not small, but he had long arms and legs, so it was not very comfortable to curl up on it. He shook his arms and neck when he got out of the car, and heard Chen Sixing, who also got off the cart, yelling, "Brother He, are you going to the city today?" Zhang Fengyuan followed the prestige and looked over. There were a few big rocks at the top of the mountain wall. People in the city would put their baskets on the rocks to rest when carrying their things, and the youngest Su was also there. He heard Su He call calmly, "Cousin." This is how people in the village are. They are either close relatives or distant relatives. Why do you carry so many things? What are they? Su He's voice was even hoarse than before, and he said concisely, "A little handmaid." Zhang Fengyuan saw that the youngest Su was also unwilling to talk to his cousin, and he felt a sense of balance in his heart, although he didn't know what he was trying to balance. "Chen Si, let's go, the master is back." He saw the master driving the cart carrying a bag of things back into the cart, and he followed it back to the ox cart. "Brother He, let's go by car. It's almost noon when you arrive in the city with so many things on your back. Go early so that the things will be sold out sooner." Chen Si called Su He enthusiastically, but was rejected as expected. "It's good to take a car, but for 4 fen in the city, you can buy 2 plain steamed buns in the city, and Su He doesn't have that kind of spare money." Chen Si didn't give up, he rolled his eyes and said loudly, "Zhang Fengyuan, please be the bullock cart." After finishing speaking, he slyly carried the man's back basket to the bullock cart. Su He hurriedly chased after him. "Why do they all like to other people's back baskets so much now, cousin? Quick, give me a hand." Chen Si handed Su He's back basket to the bullock cart, and Zhang Fengyuan sneered, "You asked someone to ride in the cart and let me pay for it? You really want to come out? They are all from the same village. Regardless of your age, brother He, why don't you call you brother, take care of your younger brother? You are a serious cousin, why don't you pay to take care of him?" Having said that, Zhang Fengyuan's hand still brought the pannier to the car before Su He chased him. Chen Si jumped into the car, and said to Su He who was standing anxiously on the ground, "The back baskets are all in the car, get up quickly." Su He's chest heaved quickly, and he glanced at his cousin Chen Si angrily. The bullock cart swayed forward, and the cold wind and morning frost were blowing. It was indeed faster than walking in the cart, but the wind was also much stronger than walking. Chen Si looked at Su He who was sitting with his legs crossed and his head bowed, and he didn't care that he didn't want to talk to him at all. As if he had seen a guide light, he asked impatiently, "Brother He, you are going to the city alone today? What about your second sister? Didn't the second sister go?" "No, she's at home." Chen Si asked again, "Then when will your second sister go to the city?" "I do not know either. When you come back later, don't rush to leave. There are a lot of good pastries in Babayazai in the city. I'll buy 2 yuan and you can take them home for me and give them to your sister, okay?" Su He sat across from the 2 men. He lowered his big eyes, his face and lips were a little unnaturally red. He got a cold from the rain before, and now his face was even redder when the wind was blowing, and the injury on his knee also turned red. "It's not good, and it hurts all the time at night." He was not feeling well, and today he wanted to go to the city to see a doctor by selling things, but he didn't want to talk, but he was short of staff and was riding in a bullock cart, so he had to open his mouth to answer. After saying a few words, he couldn't help the hoarseness and itchiness in his throat and started coughing. He only hoped that the bullock cart could go faster, so that he would avoid the wind and cold, and he would also save a few words. "Then what kind of cakes does your second sister like to eat? How about pea yellow, has she ever eaten it? The girl's family should like it very much, it's sweet and delicious." He pursed his lips, stopped coughing slightly, and couldn't bear to answer. You can do it, tell my cousin, I invite you to take the bullock cart. He held back his cough. Of course he knew that nothing came for nothing. If it wasn't for his second sister, no man in the village would talk to him. Thinking that since he was a relative with some contacts, he still had to deal with it. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly handed over a large vest made of rabbit fur before his knees. He raised his head, and saw his cousin was punched by Zhang Fengyuan, and the butcher's voice sounded coldly, "Why are you talking so much? You are so noisy, shut up." After being beaten, Chen Si really didn't want to force Suhi to inquire about Su Shaochun. He rubbed his beaten chest and gasped for air, howling in a low voice. Half of it was real pain, and half of it was fake. Seeing the situation, the two women on the bullock cart glanced left and right at Suhi. All the meaning of the search was written in their eyes. Zhang Fengyuan ignored Chen Si, instead he frowned and gave the two women a bad look, hanging down. The palm between the knees suddenly clenched into a fist again, and there was a rattling sound between the joints. The woman's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately retracted her scrutinizing gaze politely, not daring to vent her anger, and being careful not to look elsewhere. Suhi looked at Zhang Fengyuan, the two of them looked at each other, hurriedly glanced at each other without speaking, and the vest lay on his lap safely, blocking most of the cold wind. His hands were covered by a furry vest, and the soft and smooth touch was very obvious on the back of his hands. Rabbit fur is of excellent quality and keeps warm. His second sister has a scarf made of white rabbit fur. It costs 40 cents a piece, but it is really warm and looks good when worn around her neck. It complements her second sister's pink face. Yuxu is even cuter, and the second sister is usually reluctant to wear it. If it weren't for being able to hunt, no ordinary family could afford such an expensive fur vest. There was an indescribable feeling in Suhi's heart, the care and protection that his family and relatives had never given him. He actually felt it from a poor judge in the village. How can this feel good? The ox cart followed the official road to the city in about an hour, and Zhang Fengyuan paid for the ox cart master. The three kind-hearted people who knew how to do business got 2 renminbi and received 10 renminbi. Chen Si was still thinking about asking Suhi to bring pastries to Su Shaochun, but thinking about Zhang Fengyuan's dull fist, he held back his words, and stood alone at a distance, waiting for Zhang Fengyuan to go into the city together. Thanks. After Suhi got out of the ox cart, he took the vest and returned it to the owner, and thanked him with the money for the ox cart. Zhang Fengyuan took the vest that was still warm, he casually tucked it under his arm, and asked, "Are you suffering from a cold?" "Nothing serious." "Is it the wind and cold from the rain last time?" Suhi said, "It has been a bit cold for a long time, but the cold weather seems to be more serious recently." Without waiting for Zhang Fengyuan to say more, Suhi directly cut off the conversation between the two. "I'm entering the city." Zhang Fengyuan didn't bother anyone, and saw the little brother walking forward with a basket on his back, thoughtful. "Since when have you become so familiar with brother He?" From afar, Chen Si saw the two of them muttering something, and when he saw brother He walking up, he looked at Zhang Fengyuan suspiciously. "People are still staring after walking so far? You are afraid that people will be exposed to the wind and give you a vest, and you are asking people to ride in an ox cart, don't you?" Zhang Fengyuan grabbed Chen Si's raised index finger suddenly. "Don't talk nonsense." "Who is talking nonsense? You are protecting brother He like this just because you want to get closer to Shaochun. It's all brothers talking straight. Anyway, there are many people in the village staring at Shaochun, so you don't have to hide it. Well, we can compete fairly." Zhang Fengyuan gave Chen Si a sideways look, speechless, and strode towards the city. "But you go to another house to prepare for a meeting, and you think that Shaochun is even more hopeless." Chen Si was a little confused, so he hurriedly chased after him. Following the instructions of his fourth aunt He, Zhang Fengyuan first bought a box of honey-flavored shortbread, and then pulled 2 pieces of cloth. In order to show his sincerity, after buying these basic gifts from the villagers, and added a box of silk flowers that girls will wear at home, he felt that it was really troublesome. The one store in the east and the one in the west bought them with many different styles, so he might as well just take 2 pieces of meat to Guang's house, and Guang's family would probably like it if he saved the trouble. The fourth aunt laughed and scolded him for being so unsuitable for the etiquette in the village, because people would deduct points from the begging family when they saw each other. Auntie had specially confessed this thing, so he had no choice but to bite the bullet and find a jewelry shop that he had never stepped into before, and as soon as he inquired with Xiaoer, he immediately brought out big boxes and small boxes. When the box is opened, it is colorful, and there are all kinds of flowers. The price is not judged by the size, but by the degree of delicacy. The more it looks like a real flower, the more expensive it is. Looking at the pile of silk flowers, Zhang Fengyuan frowned and fiddled with them. It's better to wear real flowers, wouldn't it be more real? Xiaoer said, look at what this guest officer said, silk flowers bloom much longer than fresh flowers. Zhang Fengyuan knew nothing about these things, and had no interest in understanding them, so he said in a businesslike manner, take 2 pairs. What kind of flowers does the guest officer want? Just pick 2 festive ones for you, and ask your relatives to see them. Xiao Er was eager, okay, I'll choose 2 beautiful and festive flowers for you, and I'm sure the girl will be happy when she sees them. Chen Si was also eye-opening, dazzled, far away, why don't I pick one for Xiao Chun too? I think she should like it. As soon as the words were finished, Xiao Er, who had wrapped the silk flowers in a box, said to Zhang Fengyuan with a smile, silk flowers are 15 yuan a pair, 2 pairs are 30 yuan, and a gift box is 12 yuan. Guest officer, pay here. Chen Si shut his mouth immediately when he heard the words, and hurriedly put back the silk flowers he was playing and looking at carefully. The fake flowers are too expensive. 4 flowers plus a box cost 4 yuan, and pork can eat 2 catties. Jewelry shops are really not something ordinary people can come to. No wonder it is said that getting married is a big hurdle, and it also costs money. Zhang Fengyuan didn't think it was expensive, mainly because he was used to being extravagant. Although he was determined to be frugal, he thought that the money was spent on the real thing, and it was not a waste of money. When he used to spend money recklessly, he used to go to Fenjiuilu, where a meal in the city cost more than 1,000 wen, but today it cost nearly 300 wen to buy these things, and he just found it troublesome. Did not feel distressed. The 2 came out of the shop. Chen Sideo, my mother asked me to bring some candles and salt back home, how about we meet up at the tea shed outside the city after shopping? Zhang Fengyuan responded, okay. On the left and right, he also needs to buy some things that are missing at home, and the 2 of them will go separately to buy things, and it will be faster to join together. Zhang Fengyuan was going to a dried fruit shop to buy some dried fruit for Xiao Mao to make snacks. Before leaving, he passed a small medical clinic. We don't use credit or keep accounts in our medical center. How much should it be? 3 doses of common typhoid medicine are only 30 wen, how come 2 doses here cost 40 wen? Food, cloth, and clothes can increase in price, but the price of our medicine for curing diseases and saving lives will not go up. The doctor boy who picked up the medicine said impatiently, can you afford it? It's only 30 yuan, so why don't you have it? Suhi opened his mouth, I don't want it anymore. Hearing the words, the medical boy stroked his sleeves, the medicines are prepared and you say no, you are so funny, you don't need the things, but you have to pay for them. It was also the first time for Suhi to meet such a strong buyer and seller. He frowned and turned around to leave without answering the doctor boy. Suddenly, 2 men came out of the door and guarded the door. If you want to leave, it's not so easy not to lose money. The medical boy put down his abacus and came out from the counter, sneered and approached Suhi with his hands behind his back, what's the matter, pay or not? Suhi's heart beat a little faster, and he subconsciously stepped back. How could he not be afraid of being surrounded by a few men so unkindly? How much do you want? The medicine specially prepared for you must not be used by others. If you calculate the manpower and material resources, you will have to pay double the price. When Suhi opened his eyes, he also wanted to use the money to calm things down, but there was not enough money to buy medicines. Where did he get so much money? And just when he didn't know what to do, two muffled groans suddenly came from behind. People are quite weird. It's lively. What kind of money do I need to accompany? I'll take a look. Seeing the two gatekeepers being kicked open and a tall and burly man coming in against the light, the medical boy swallowed slightly and took a step back. No, nothing. Zhang Fengyuan threw the medicine bag on the medical boy's face, and pulled Suhi's wrist out of the hospital. You have to spend money to see a doctor and buy medicine. From now on, you will see that there are no customers in this small shop in a remote area. You, a little brother, don't go in alone. There are many people in the city who look at peace, and the mixed fish and dragons are comparable to a village. It's much more chaotic here. Some of them are black shops that specialize in catching orders and bullying them. Zhang Fengyuan has been in the city for a long time, and he knows these things very well. If he hadn't been bumped into by him just now, it would be a trivial matter to be asked for money. He might not be sure that these unscrupulous people would do anything. Thinking of this, he couldn't help scolding people. After talking for a while, the person behind him didn't answer a word. His head was hanging lower than on the scooter, and he walked unsteadily, so he stopped in his tracks. Suhi didn't know that the person in front of him stopped suddenly, and it was true that what happened just now made him feel lingering fear, but after Zhang Fengyuan came in, he breathed a sigh of relief. With a bang, he bumped directly into Zhang Fengyuan's body and was almost knocked to the ground. Zhang Fengyuan frowned. Did you listen to me? Listen, remember. Zhang Fengyuan was furious, but seeing that he didn't seem to be awake today, he softened his tone. Is everything sold? Sold a chicken coop and some back ropes. Later, his throat was really sore, he couldn't make a sound when he yelled, his head was dizzy, and his whole body was very heavy, so he had to go to a medical clinic to get medicine. He thought that a small medical clinic would be more affordable, but unexpectedly, he went to a black shop by mistake. Are you feeling unwell? Suhi looked up at him, his face was already very red, as if he could feel the heat from his skin through the air. Without saying a word, Zhang Fengyuan grabbed the wrist of the crumbling man and strode forward. Suhi was a little panicked, but he didn't have the strength to break free from him, he didn't even have the strength to open his mouth to ask him what he wanted, so he was dragged into a big medical clinic on the main street. The courtyard-shaped two-story medical center is full of patients, the doctors and medical children are a bit busy. Suhi is a little cramped, he has never been to such a large medical center, he doesn't even know where to grab the medicine, and he is flustered. The person beside him said, "You wait for me here for a while, I will go to the doctor." He was placed by Zhang Fengyuan in the place where the patients were waiting for treatment. He watched the familiar figure go to the counter to talk to the doctor boy, acting like a family member would do. The person became weak, his nose became sore and his eyes fogged up inadvertently. "Hikir, why did you come back so late? If it's raining, make dinner earlier if you have nothing to do. I hurt my leg when I went up the mountain to collect firewood, and it was a bit chilly in the rain. I need to wash and clean up." Su's mother looked at the person who came back with a half-empty basket on his back. His whole body was wet by the rain. After going out for a long time, he finally came back with some palm coats. She didn't say anything, but her eyes flicked back and forth. Sweeping the back basket, the meaning is more obvious than opening his mouth directly. Who doesn't suffer from 3 disasters and 6 pains? It's easy to get wind and cold in winter. Doesn't your second sister have some coughs before? It's normal. I don't want to worry about it. Look at you, you are such a big kid, you still don't know how to chop firewood, your knee fell, and you got such a big hole in your trousers. Our family is not a wealthy family. We usually take care of our clothes. The whole family people's clothes belong to you, the fastest and most damaged. Your father is not as good as you. Suhi listened to every sentence of loving mother's concern, but he didn't care about himself at all. Thinking of the second sister's oily skin, she was like an ant in a hot pot. On the other hand, her calm attitude towards him made him I really didn't want to say much, so I dragged my injured leg back to the house to deal with it. Dinner was late at night, and all three of the family of four were complaining and blaming. Over the years, he thought that he had settled his position in that family long ago, and his heart was as hard and cold as iron, but iron would also burn when it was heated. Sitting on the stool, recalling the whole story of his injury, he lowered his head slightly, unable to restrain the tears in his eyes. Is it so uncomfortable? The doctor will be here soon. Zhang Fengyuan looked at the little brother who was hugging his knees and was about to form a ball. His thin back was trembling slightly. He knew that people were in a bad mood. He seldom spoke soft words and was not good at coaxing people. He urged the doctor boy to arrange it quickly. The doctor boy saw that he lowered his head and talked softly with his little brother, but when he raised his head, he looked ferocious, and sighed that the speed of changing his face was hindered by the fact that the man gave money and was strong, so the doctor boy had to go again to see if the doctor had finished treating the previous one. The doctor is well, this gentleman, you can take the patient to see a doctor. Hearing the words, Zhang Fengyuan leaned down to help Suhi. Can you still stand up? Suhi quickly wiped his eyes, propped himself up on the stool. Zhang Fengyuan still helped his wrist. An old doctor in the consultation room was writing a prescription, and watched the two come in and say hello to sit down. The doctor glanced at the patient, and then at the tall and burly Zhang Fengyuan. He looked familiar, as if he often saw him coming to the clinic to get medicine for bruises and bones for a while. But he doesn't specialize in muscles and bones, and he doesn't know the name of this person. What kind of patient are you? He looked at Zhang Fengyuan, glanced at brother he and asked. I'm his elder brother. A while ago, my younger brother went up the mountain to cut firewood and injured his leg, and got caught in the rain. It's windy and cold. Please take a look at the doctor. The old doctor responded, checked the pulse as usual, and asked Heger to roll up his trousers to look at the wound on his knee. Ah, the wound has been there for several days. I haven't bandaged it and applied medicine, but I haven't paid attention to rest. It's all inflamed, and I don't blame you for typhoid fever. The rain is one end, and the wound infection will also cause fever. The old doctor looked at the pitiful little brother and knew the sufferings of the people in the countryside. He has never seen any suffering in his life of practicing medicine, so he turned his head and blamed the tall and strong boy behind. How many people in the family can't do it? You shouldn't let the injured do it after all. If you don't take good care of your body, the loss outweighs the gain. Can you still work hard after the root of the disease has fallen? Zhang Fengyuan nodded. What the doctor said is true. Suhi frowned. He didn't expect Zhang Fengyuan to be so cooperative. The old doctor saw that Zhang Fengyuan was quite sincere, so he stopped chattering, and said, now the old man will prescribe some wound medicine. Your wound needs to be treated again now. Medicine should be taken immediately. You can't be sloppy anymore. Prescribe another. Take the medicine for typhoid fever twice a day when you go home, and you will be healthy in a short time. After the prescription was written, the doctor gave it to Zhang Fengyuan and asked him to go out to get the medicine. Suhi watched the person go out, and then he expressed his concerns, and asked the doctor about the cost of the consultation in a low voice. The old doctor stretched his eyelids. Our Shenkaotang is a century-old pharmacy in Xiyang City. It is not a small pharmacy that is scammed. The price is very fair and will not charge you randomly. Besides, don't worry, your elder brother is not here. Place, you don't need to pay for it. It would be even more embarrassing for Suhi to say that, and it would be hard to say that Zhang Fengyuan is not his brother, and it would only increase misunderstandings by then. Zhang Fengyuan moved quickly, and it may be that Yao Tong was afraid of his swiftness, and within a quarter of an hour, he took the medicine back. There were not only plasters for external application, but also typhoid medicine for internal use. Several large bags were worn with hemp rope. The doctor disinfected Heger's wound, scraped off the carrion that had not been treated these days, and then applied the medicine to the wound. Heger can bear the pain very well, but the doctor is getting old, and his movements are a little slow. The carrion scraped him from time to time, and the pain made him gasp. After the medicine was applied, the hot legs felt cool, which relieved some pain. Don't let the wound get wet. After you go back, you have to change the dressing every day. Your knee is only hurting the skin and not the bones. As long as you use the medicine properly, it will scab over in a few days. Yes. Suhi honestly agreed, thank you doctor. The wound was bandaged for a stick of incense, and Suhi didn't hear Zhang Fengyuan's words on the way, thinking that he had left. When he got up and turned around after bandaging, he saw the butcher standing quietly at the door again, following the New Year stickers. Same as door god. When he walked over, the door suddenly pulled out a bunch of candied haws from his arms as if by magic. Suhi was stunned, staring blankly at the bunch of sugar-coated hawthorns, which were red in color and crystal clear in sugar coating. The old doctor smiled. The child clamored for adults to buy candy after seeing the doctor, but your brother doesn't want you to be coaxed. Suhi blushed, and was embarrassed to pick up the child's things, but the butcher stuffed them into the palm of his hand. Mr. Syat, let's go. I will pay you back the money for today's consultation. After leaving the door of the hospital, Suhi spoke righteously. Zhang Fengyuan didn't shirk it. He knew that Suhi wanted to be strong, and the two of them were not related, so this was the best way, as you like. It's a total of 65 coins, don't worry about giving it to me, just give it when you have money. Suhi's flesh hurt a bit, but looking at the large and small packages of medicine, in fact, what the doctor said was to the point, and it was not expensive. As long as the injury can be cured, the money is well spent. After the two went out, they were silent and did not speak, and went straight to the outside of the city gate. Suhi didn't intend to be brave when he went back this time. Just feel sorry for yourself. The ox cart master hadn't come yet, and Zhang Fengyuan happened to be waiting for Chen Si in the tea shed, so he waited together. Brother, he watched Zhang Fengyuan mention a lot of things, and it was rare for him to take the initiative to ask, I heard you are getting married. Zhang Fengyuan was a little surprised how Suhi knew, but thinking of Chen Si's words, he felt normal again. I haven't made up my mind, I bought things first and went to have a look. Most of the people who look at each other don't succeed, like me. It's even more difficult. You are sincere, you won't. Zhang Fengyuan glanced at Suhi, and said with a negligent smile, really? On a whim, he took out the box and pushed it towards Suhi. Look, do you like it? Suhi lowered his eyes, looked at the exquisite and beautiful jewelry box, and looked forward to it. When the gift box was opened, 4 big and round red flowers were eye-catching. Very festive. Zhang Fengyuan was very happy when he heard the words, congratulations. I let the second brother choose. Suhi wanted to euphemistically remind the young girl that she might not like it very much, but there was a shout from a distance, drawn cart, cart. Is there anyone going? He got up quickly, I'll go back first. Zhang Fengyuan nodded, go back. Suhi waved to the driver of the ox cart, walked over step by step, and turned back halfway, thank you. Zhang Fengyuan shook his head with a smile. Not long after the ox cart left, Zhang Fengyuan drank a cup of tea in the tea shed, and Chen Si came back with the things his family told him to buy, and the two returned to the village together. It wasn't too late to return to the village. After lunch, Zhang Fengyuan returned home and Mrs. He was already waiting at the door. When he saw someone coming back, he hurriedly greeted him, is everything ready? Zhang Fengyuan nodded, he's beaming, then we will go there this afternoon, it's just right. Zhang Fengyuan was slightly taken aback, in such a hurry. Silly boy, wouldn't it be better to get things done sooner? Zhang Fengyuan laughed. Mrs. He combed her hair and tidied up her whole body. Zhang Fengyuan also went into the house and changed clothes. The two packed up their gifts and went to Guang's house at the village boundary. It has only been a few years since the Guang family moved to Jizhu village, and they live far away. They are at the border of the two villages, and they are not close to the people in the two villages. It is rare for anyone to have a wedding or funeral. Someone called this family. Everyone didn't know much about the Guang family, they only knew that the couple looked honest and didn't talk too much when they met, so they didn't show any hostility or exclusion towards the new household, and they would still be polite when they met. He and Zhang Xishan, as Zhang Fengyuan's elders, felt that since there was nothing good to say in the village, Shang Guang's family was also good. After all, they were all from the same village, and they were close to each other, so there was nothing wrong with it. Yes, it's easier than the far village. As the two were walking on the road, Mrs. He said happily, "Your uncle means that Ruoxiang sees it, and then we will have a big event. It will be lively, and everyone in the village will come to have a drink." The two were looking forward to good things, but within half an hour they saw the Guang family on the border from a distance. The houses in the countryside are all covered with mud and thatched roofs. Those with better conditions have tile roofs, and the better ones have stone roofs. There are only 3 or 2 families in Jizhu village with such courage. In fact, the Zhang family has several uncles, and they are also known as famous families in the village. For example, his uncle's house and the 6th uncle's house are built with tile-roofed houses, which are the portals of the middle and upper classes. If it wasn't for Zhang Fengyuan not doing a proper job and doing a decent job in the city, making money today and spending it today, if he managed to get married earlier in the village, he might be able to squeeze into the upper middle class, but now there is nothing like a piece of paper. Reservoir dogs. But now he has devoted himself to correcting it, and after reassuring his 4th uncle again and again, his 4th uncle said that the future can be expected. And this Guang family is obviously a lower class family. It can be seen from the small dilapidated house. There are many children, but no one has a big future. Life is very difficult. It is precisely because he is poor, otherwise he would not choose Zhang Fengyuan as a villager. Here we come. Here comes the blind date. The youngest son of the Guang family was playing with grass and insects on the fence, and seeing the 2 people coming along the mountain path, he hurriedly shouted and ran into the house. Hearing the sound, Guang's mother came out to open the gate of the courtyard. The 5th girl, who was seeing each other this time, was a little nervous and impatient, so she peeked at the door half hidden. She had heard from the matchmaker that she was a butcher, strong and tall, and her mother had told her for a long time that although a butcher was fierce but skilled, it was a good choice, and she was prepared in her heart. But when she looked at the man with thick eyebrows and big eyes, broad shoulders and head held high, the girl was still a little timid. This man was upright and even handsome, but he was too strong. If he had a bad temper, he could kill him with just 2 fists. She felt a little discouraged. It can be seen that the man's clothes are very good, but he brought a lot of things when he came to see him, and he owed it in his heart. The Zhang family is generally a big family in the village, and their family situation is much better than theirs. After they get married, they will definitely not have to continue to eat bran and swallow vegetables at home, which really moved her. Furthermore, the family is really in a difficult situation now. The 2nd elder brother is old and has not yet found a girl, and the younger brother. He was injured when he went out to work a while ago, and he has to pay for medicine. I'm afraid I won't be able to survive. Getting married is the best choice for her, since she can live better and the family can get some money. Please sit down, please sit down. Guang Niang's courtyard is well cleaned up, and the chickens and ducks are strong. They're all small things, Mrs. Zhang, don't laugh at them. Zhang Fengyuan entered the yard, and the two women chatted and laughed like a family. He is really clumsy in these matters, and he needs a woman to talk, so begging his aunt to come really begging correct. He honestly followed behind she, taking gifts when he was asked, and calling people when he was asked, which was very well arranged. Should I ask the girl to come out and take a look? It's still necessary for these young people to close their eyes, don't you think, Miss Guang? After chatting about the household chores, he returned to the topic, and Guang's mother also went on the road, yelling into the room, "Chewer!" Zhang Fengyuan waited for someone to come out. Seeing that Guang Mu's face was not ugly, he thought Zhou Zheng was born to a young daughter. At this time, there is usually a ceremony, and the girl's family has to urge her to pretend to be shy. Zhang Fengyuan waited patiently, but the girl didn't shout out, and a man with a chicken came in first from outside the courtyard. The eyes of several people were naturally attracted. Guang's mother saw that the tone of the curse was familiar, as if blaming him for coming back at the wrong time. "I will not take good care of me when I am sick, and I have to go out when my sister says we are going to do any work." He turned his head and smiled and introduced to He and Zhang Fengyuan, "This is our second child who is worthless." Zhang Fengyuan tilted his head, looking at the chubby figure. He felt a little familiar, but couldn't remember it for a while. When the second child of the Guang family raised his head, the wicked face made him stand up in disregard of etiquette. He was already facing fiercely, but when he showed a slightly angry expression, his face became even more threatening. He was startled, and asked in a low voice, "Put it far away, what's going on?" She gently tugged on the hem of Laren's clothes, "But don't cause any conflicts at this moment. The second son of the Guang family seems to have had some wine and his mind is in a daze." He raised his head and saw the man standing in the yard. He shivered reflexively and hid back. As soon as he loosened his hand, the half-dead chicken jumped out of his hand. "Go out!" Zhang Fengyuan stared at the panicked domestic chicken, narrowed his eyes slightly and said to the second child of the Guang family, "Are you from this family?" The man was too shy to answer his words, and hid behind Guang Mu, "Mother." Guang's mother also saw that there was a dispute between the two, and immediately smoothed things over. "You child, if you are not comfortable, go into the house. A big man is showing his timidity outside." "Mrs. Zhang, where are we talking?" Mrs. He was about to answer, but Zhang Fengyuan said directly, "There is no need to look at each other, Auntie, let's go." What's the matter?" He hurriedly grabbed the man with a dark face. Zhang Fengyuan said, "There is no such fate." Guang's mother knew that Zhang Fengyuan's reputation was not good, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. She felt that the talent was quite outstanding, and she was still humble in front of her elders. The little girl's family is too one-sided in her view of men. She only knows how to choose a scholar who is gentle and considerate with a tone of voice, but she doesn't know that after marriage, she has to be Zhang Fengyuan, which has many benefits. Yuan Guang was quite satisfied with seeing people, but she didn't get along with her son, but now her face changed as soon as she said it, and she didn't even care about the situation, so she became unhappy. "Ms. Zhang, what do you mean?" "I begged the matchmaker to come and see her, but she quit before seeing her." "Is it true that our Guang family is a newcomer and easy to bully?" She was in a dilemma, looked at Zhang Fengyuan. Zhang Fengyuan didn't want to directly expose people's faults, but Guang's mother insisted on being obsessed, so he said politely, "May I ask what the second brothers of the Guang family do for a living?" Guang's mother's face immediately turned ugly when she heard the words, but she still said, "The second child is not talented, and he does some odd jobs in the city, and occasionally works as a helper in the neighboring village." Zhang Fengyuan glanced sideways at the chickens in the yard. "You should know what the second brother is doing. After all, everything is brought into the house. A poor man can't be poor. Although I, Zhang Fengyuan, can't do anything, I can do it. Not the brother-in-law of the second brother Guang. The last time I touched my head, I warned him, het." Zhang Fengyuan sneered, it seems that the second brother will not repent, I can't swallow this kiss. Although he didn't say it outright, Mrs. He is also a smart person. He immediately understood what was going on, even though he was dissatisfied with his nephew's sudden turn of events, but there are brothers with bad character in this family, so the marriage must not be tolerated. Of Miss Guang, since that's the case, then we won't bother you. Mrs. He was very on the nephew's side and said that she was about to leave when she mentioned the things she brought, but this move made Guang's mother jump up. The fact that the family's shady idea was uncovered, and the marriage was lost because of it, Guang's mother was ashamed and angry, and when a person was unreasonable, she would try to find some momentum from other places. It turned out that you were the one who beat our second child like that. He hurt his ribs and was frightened. He was bedridden for 2 days. Now he was barely able to go out, but you threatened him again. A butcher can bully others like this? Today's marriage can be dismissed, but you will pay for my son's medical treatment. The second child of the Guang family hid behind the door. The siblings were together, listening to the quarrel outside. Miss Guangwu glanced at her brother, felt so ashamed, wiped her eyes and ran into the inner room crying, then said, my brother can't do this job, and he's still doing it. Guang Er scolded, why didn't I see you say these words when eating meat? Meat is still the most delicious. After scolding, he secretly looked at Zhang Fangyuan in fear, secretly hating his mother for saying such words. He has experienced firsthand how vicious this butcher is. If he disagrees, let him go and let the matter go. Now that he says he will lose money, if the butcher goes crazy, he will beat the whole family to hell. He was terrified and didn't dare to go out. He only complained that he didn't listen to the man's family when the matchmaker came to marry him. However, all these things at home were handled by his mother, and he couldn't even eat enough. Who would have thought about it? Never mind that. After Zhang Fangyuan listened to Guang Mu's words, he directly protected Mrs. He behind him with a smirk, and looked down at Guang Mu. What's the matter? If I don't pay today, Mrs. Guang will keep me for dinner? No way. I boast that I have seen many shameless people, but I never thought Mrs. Guang was even better. Guang's mother changed her usual image of not talking much in the village, thinking that Zhang Fangyuan would be afraid of being on her own territory, with a large number of children and a large population, so she pointed directly at Zhang Fangyuan's nose and scolded, beating people is still a shame. If you don't lose money, you will be your father. Don't say you don't want to, I still don't want to promise a girl to such a tyrannical person like you. Look at who in the village and outside the village will marry the girl and brother to you. Go be a bachelor all your life, old widower. All kinds of past lives flashed through Zhang Fangyuan's mind, his eyes sharpened, and with a bang, he slammed his fist down in front of Guang's mother, breaking a corner of the wooden table in the yard. Mother Guang trembled, her shoulders trembled, she stared blankly at the person and couldn't shout anymore. Miss Guang, you might as well try whether your mouth is tough or my fist is tough. Zhang Fangyuan turned and called she, Auntie, let's go. The two came and went. When the people walked away, Guang's mother's legs softened and she fell back to the chair. Guang the fifth girl and the youngest son at home quickly surrounded her. Mother, are you okay? This butcher is so vicious, it's a good thing that the marriage failed, otherwise the daughter would have suffered a lot after marrying. Mom, he won't sue us, will he? The ears were buzzing loudly like mosquitoes, and Guang's mother didn't even have time to catch her breath. What, sue? He said yes. The court is about evidence. Can he show it? After hearing this, Guang Er breathed a sigh of relief. Mother and fifth sister, don't be angry, they just stewed this chicken at night, so mother can rest assured. Guang's mother was quite tired physically and mentally, and her legs could not use the strength on the chair. She waved her hand, Lao Wu will cook at night. Miss Guang Guo pinched her fingers, feeling a little sad, but she obediently went to get the chicken to kill, as if even a big deal couldn't bear a bite of meat. Far away, don't worry about this matter. Knowing your character earlier is much better than knowing that you can't peel it off after you get married. You did the right thing. We can't look for petty thieves. Knowing the whole story, Mrs. He consoled, who would have thought that this family would be like this, and Guang'er's mother would not advise and teach how to make it happen. Zhang Fengyuan sighed for a long time. I said, how could the butcher recognize me when that kid was stealing things on the mountain, but I didn't recognize me when I looked at it. I was from the Guang family. I only regret that I didn't catch that kid last time. His hands are discounted, but he can still do these things. Mrs. He shook her head. Forget it, we won't be in contact with the Guang family again. Auntie will go to your Aunt Gan's again, and I'm sure we can find someone suitable. Talk later. Zhang Fengyuan was a little irritable. He thought that things would fail, but he never thought that it would fail in this way. There was a lot of discussion about the marriage in the village, and although they didn't talk about the marriage with others this morning, there were always people who wanted to inquire about it. People in the village dare not ask Zhang Fengyuan, but they always ask Mr. He. The He family is not a woman with a bad mouth. She doesn't want to talk about people's good and bad, she just says that the two parties are not suitable. Thinking about the sons and daughters in that room are all parents, she still left some for the Guang family. Feelings. The failure of the marriage seems to be a reasonable result. The women in the village laughed about it, but they didn't take it seriously. However, within a few days, there was a gust of evil wind in the village. Since Suhi went to the city to pick up the medicine, he didn't go out much these days, and used the excuse of burning winter charcoal to raise it at home for a few days. The weather was fine that day, and he saw that his knees were also scabbed. After taking a few doses of medicine, the typhoid fever was also cured, so he took a basin and went to the river to wash clothes. The clothes of the whole family were packed into a big basket, and he carried and hugged the tub in his back basket. There were not many days of good weather in winter, and there were already many boys and girls washing clothes by the river. Everyone was talking and laughing. It's so lively. He is also here to do laundry, hurry up, let me move you. A woman warmly beckoned him to come over, but Suhi was not polite, and went straight to put down the basin. Miss Mao, you called brother He to come over, don't you want to inquire about his second sister? What's the matter, miss, why don't you inquire about the situation? The Mao lady was also straightforward, and said bluntly, brother He, the family has chosen a husband for your sister, right? Suhi rubbed his clothes, no. What he answered was the truth, and it was also what the second sister and his mother told him. He had to say no to anyone who asked him about everything, so that there would be more people to choose from. Miss Su has to choose from thousands of choices. How can she fall in love with him so quickly? If Mrs. Mao is interested, it would be better to find a matchmaker and go directly to the house to talk. In addition to married women, there are also many unmarried girls and brothers who do laundry. When a woman with a son stares at Su Xiaochun and asks, everyone is naturally unhappy. Su Xiaochun is responsible for all the good things in the village. Who would be willing to listen to her marriage after going out to wash clothes after taking over? At this time, a man passed by on the ridge in the distance, and someone with bright eyes changed the topic directly, look, isn't that the second child of the Guang family? He really went to the city to get medicine and came back. Sin, the butcher in our village is really not a human being. There were two girls who didn't go out, and the news was not very well informed. It sounded like there was a lot of excitement, so they couldn't help asking, what's the matter? Don't you know about Zhang Fengyuan's courtship? Suhi paused when he heard the man's name rubbing his clothes, and couldn't help but look up at the man in the distance. His brows froze suddenly. Earlier, the matchmaker told Zhang Fengyuan about the fifth girl from the Guang family. The butcher went to see her a while ago, and he disliked the poverty of the Guang family, and even insulted Guang Er for not doing his job properly. There was a quarrel between the two sides, and the butcher's violent temper got on his hands. He smashed someone's table and beat Guang Er, Guang's mother is still lying at home now. The two girls opened their mouths in disbelief. Is this true? Can there be a fake? Then Guang Er is very angry when he walks, and he goes to the herbal doctor to get medicine. The lady of the Guang family wipes her tears when someone asks about it. I feel pitiful. Zhang Fengyuan is not a good person. He is not fooling around in the city, fighting and making troubles, but also watching casinos for others. This business is hard to be a proper job. His vision is so high. If you think this is not that, you can do it. It's strange to marry a daughter-in-law. His fourth uncle and fourth aunt were asked urgently, but they defended and argued, saying that the Guang family is not a good family, and that Mr. Guang's second-hand feet are not clean, so everyone should be careful. The woman snorted, I have never seen anyone who is so protective of relatives. If the marriage fails, you are still a fellow countryman. You fight with them, and you can't find a reason to say such nasty things. Slander people who moved out. It's just too much. At first, I thought Mrs. He was a reasonable person, but I didn't realize that he had this kind of character. From now on, I won't talk to Xiao Mao from their family. What about Xiao Mao? He's only a little older. The biggest headache for the Zhang family right now is Zhang Fengyuan, the eldest nephew. Does it look like a decent person to make trouble? No matter how much money he gives as a gift, don't even think about asking for a daughter-in-law in the village. You unmarried girls and brothers, you should be vigilant, keep your eyes open, and don't be deceived, otherwise you will suffer a lot in the future. Everyone was talking lively, but suddenly a voice broke the climax, and said coldly, what aunt he said is true, she didn't protect Zhang Fengyuan, the second son of the Guang family just has dirty hands and feet. Everyone was stunned, seeing Su He's cold face refuting everyone's conversation with righteous words. They were a little surprised that he, a person who doesn't talk much, would participate in the conversation, but also dissatisfied that he didn't follow everyone's words. What do you, a little brother, know? The Zhang family has nothing to do with your family. Why do you still speak for them? Su He didn't change his face, what I'm telling is the truth. The woman said, hey, look at this brother he's still fucked. A little brother joked, brother if you speak for the butcher like this, is it possible that he wants to come to your house to propose marriage? The family agreed, right. That's right, your sister has such a high vision, so she definitely doesn't want to. Your parents want to promise you to him? There are not many choices, so you should weigh it carefully. Zhang Fengyuan is not a good match. Yes, I don't know when I will do something to you. Everyone laughed. Su He ignored everyone's jokes, picked up the laundry tub, and was about to leave the right and wrong nest to wash alone. Before leaving, he said coldly, believe it or not, don't be careful, don't cry when you lose something father calls mother. You little brother, how can you speak so badly? The woman threw down the washing mallet, pinched her waist and opened her mouth to scold. It should be that the men in the village look down on your second sister and look down on you. A man with your temper is a match for that savage butcher. Su He was not angry or ashamed, anyway, behind his back, everyone was comparing him to his second sister, but he was talking about it in public and behind his back. He had heard these words a long time ago, so he squatted down and rubbed his clothes. The woman wanted to fight, but he refused to answer. She punched the cotton and made her angry, but she couldn't help it. She cursed a few more words before being persuaded by the others. Who is it really? He has a really weird temper. Su He turned a deaf ear and continued to wash clothes in an orderly manner. Little did he know that on the other side of the small river blocked by the fine bamboo bag, Zhang Fengyuan, who had lost his bait and went fishing in deep water, listened to the right and wrong of the stick of incense, and he never said a word. These days, hearing gossip and gossip makes my ears calloused, and I am really a dumb person who eats coptis, and I can't tell what I suffer. I didn't expect the Guang family to be so shameless, to save him favors but come out to bite back, crying and pretending to be pitiful everywhere. He has a bad reputation in the village, but he took advantage of the Guang family's loopholes, really thought he was a bully and bullied the newly moved family. Wherever he went, the villagers couldn't avoid him. He is thick-skinned now, but he sees it quite openly, but he feels very sorry for the fourth uncle's family, who tried to take care of him, but ended up making trouble like this, and these gossips in the village said so. If Su-he hadn't stood up to speak for him just now, with his temper, he would have thrown his fishing rod over there and made his mouth broken, but Su-he was on the other side, and he endured it, and still didn't go to meddle. He still can't do the thing of beating a woman's brother. The fishing rod moved, and he pulled it up a little distractedly. The Toinch Crucian carp was alive and kicking, and he roughly tore it off the hook and threw it into the fishing basket. Su-he seemed to be in good health, and compared to the hoarse throat like a wild duck before, his voice was now clear and clear. After he recovered, his voice was still quite nice. Especially when the 3 words Zhang Fang Yuan are said. He doesn't like to talk and doesn't like to deal with people's temperament, so he will speak for him. In the whole village, except for Sibo's family, no one speaks for him anymore. After a long while, he realized that he seemed to be laughing belatedly. "Auntie, I caught some fish in the river, let's stew them tonight." After Zhang Fang Yuan returned home with the fish basket, he went straight to his fourth uncle's house to have a cheeky meal with ingredients. He has the shortcomings of most men in today's era, such as spending money lavishly, not knowing how to cook and housework, and he has become more and more familiar with eating at Zhang Shishan's house recently. There are also things that Xiangjian bought before, but I can't use them. Auntie will take them to see if they can be used. The cakes were given to Xiao Mao early in the morning, but they could not be kept for long, and the leftover cloth and silk flowers were put in the house. Today he went home and looked at the trouble, and he hugged them together again. The cloth and silk flowers can be saved for later use. Zhang Fang Yuan said, "No, it probably won't be needed." "You child, how can you get discouraged so quickly?" "I'm not discouraged. It's not appropriate to ask the next family for something that the previous family admires." He nodded, too. Everyone tacitly didn't mention the current gossip in the village, and said something happy, "It's good to eat fish tonight, let's cook some sour bamboo shoots and sauerkraut, and you both like it." Dad went to catch 2 fish and came back to eat them. "Your fourth uncle's skill is good enough to catch fish in the field in summer, but let him go fishing in winter and there will be no stock for most of the day, and he has been shirking and refusing to go out." Zhang Fang Yuan laughed, ran around in the kitchen for a while, said a few words to Mrs. He before entering the house. Xiao Mao was practicing needlework, and the plum blossom purse had been embroidered vividly, and it was said that he could pick up the city. Li Buletin's job is done, and he is so motivated that he doesn't go out to play anymore. His fourth uncle, Zhang Shishan, was rubbing the dried hemp in the middle hall, and Zhang Fang Yuan sat down beside him, and rubbed a few of them too. "Don't take what you say outside, you did the right thing. If you can't find it in our village, go to other villages to have a look." Zhang Fang Yuan was originally anxious to settle down, but he calmed down after this incident. In the final analysis, this matter depends on fate, and there is no need to rush. I didn't take it to heart, and told my aunt to stop rushing away. I have other plans in mind. Zhang Shishan put down the work in his hands, afraid that Zhang Fang Yuan would be overwhelmed, and said, "What are you planning?" "I'm making a living and doing some small business." Zhang Fang Yuan said, "My folks look down on me. One is that my reputation has been bad before, and the other is that I don't have any errands to do." "Don't worry, uncle, I won't mess around." Zhang Shishan took a long look at the person in front of him, but he didn't say anything.